We're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. Today is Monday, June 17. It is 5:01. So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right.
Yeah, it's right here. I'm sorry. Thanks.
All right. Have you guys had a chance to review the meeting minutes of May 20?
Yes.
And if so, can I get a motion?
I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Is there any questions relating to military operations? All right, hearing none. Let's jump on to the old business. First, well, we'll do this how we've been doing it last time. So we'll do the staff presentation, and then we'll do the applicant's presentation, and then we'll jump to public comments. If we could limit it to 5 minutes each, that would be good. Just come up to the podium, state your name and your relation to the project. And then we will jump onto board discussion, and then board decision. So the first on old business is Marshview Estates, major subdivision. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ryan Green. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, this is the major subdivision sketch plan for Marshview Estates. Here is an artist's rendition of the overall subdivision and how it will look on the site. Give you a second to look at it. Again, this is a subdivision request for the 3 parcels highlighted in green. It's zone T4 in neighborhood. There is no maximum density. The setbacks in the front are 0 to 15 feet. On the corner or alley side, it is 0 to 10 feet. Sorry, 0 to 10. On the interior is 5 and the rear is 15 feet. The maximum per zone, height-wise, is 4 stories, and the parcel in total is 14 acres. The applicant is requesting a major subdivision of approximately 14 acres that provides 37 units with a density of 2.6 dwelling units per acre. This is the revised layout with the PC's comments incorporated from the last meeting. It also should be in your staff packet. A bit of background, at the May 20th meeting, the PC voted to table this proposal with a request for revisions and more info. If this subdivision sketch plan is approved, the project will move to the site plan, then final plat phases, which are handled by staff. Access and transportation, the subdivision will have only 1 access point on Harding Street. Staff sought to have 2 access points, but no feasible solution was available. Also, in review with the county transportation staff, it was determined that this development would cause less than 50 max trips per hour. And street stubs and connectivity, the proposal shows 5 dead-end streets. The Beaufort Code only allows dead-end streets if the TRC or Technical Review Committee approves it. Staff has included a condition to all dead-end streets shall be converted to cul-de-sacs or a turnaround design. Also, Dominion Energy has a 50-foot easement that crosses the middle portion of the site. The applicant has provided a letter of power availability and must follow all guidelines set by Dominion Energy. Amenities. The proposal has tot swings, bench swings, and a nature trail for the residents. Public opposition. To date, staff has received 2 emails and 1 phone call in opposition. The main concerns were wildlife disturbance, traffic, and a gated entrance. Compliance with the code. Proposal has a density of 2.64 dwelling units per acre. Block lengths are between 140 to 340 feet, and 10% of the site is reserved for open space via a community park. Again, the T4 end zone has no maximum density. The maximum block length is 400 feet. The open space for this development is 10%, and community park is an allowed open space. Now moving on to what the commission requested for last time and what staff currently has. The PC requested trees be preserved, increased sidewalk width to 6 feet, sidewalk be extended on the southeast portion to the 2 other lots, and additional parking for the waterfront park and mail kiosks. Currently, more specimen trees are remaining on the site, specifically at the entrance, along the main access roads, and the hammerhead turnarounds. The sidewalk width is now 6 feet. The sidewalk has also been extended on the southeast portion to the other 2 lots. And there are 7 additional parking spaces on the east and west of the waterfront park. Continued, PC requested a tree removal plan, a conceptual grading and drainage plan, an average plot plan with all impervious areas showed, parking, and a rendering of the home. A signed letter from the developer stating that no home shall be taller than 3 stories or 35 feet. And a signed letter from the fire marshal. Currently, the applicants will still need to provide a formal tree removal plan. The conceptual plan for the grading drainage has been forwarded to the PC. And they now have a plot plan that shows the impervious surface, all the parking, and the artist rendition was shown on the second slide. The applicant has also provided a letter from the developer about the height of the houses. I have a copy if y'all would want to look at it just to see it. It's in email. And the fire marshal does not have a signed letter because the distances weren't shown, but I have a slide detailing what they require. So as you see on the screen here, here is a plot plan of the home. There's 5 spaces in total, with 3 being under the home and 2 in the driveway. The impervious surface is about 34%. And it actually meets the ordinance because they're allowed to have 70% be impervious in the zone. Any questions?
Was this part of our package? Because this is the first time I'm seeing this.
No, sir. The documents came in sporadically, so no.
I think this is part of what we requested from the
Yes, sir,
applicant
it
at the
is.
last meeting.
Making sure everybody can see it at least one time. Here is the fire turnaround access provided by the fire marshal. Granted, there was no formal letter, but this was actually a part of my conversation with them in the first submittal. As long as the road is under 150 feet, no turnaround apparatus is required. But if it is, you need to have one of these designs. And they also have hammerheads at the ends. So it's, from what I understand, it doesn't meet it currently.
That 150 feet, exactly what is that?
Okay. No dead end street is allowed to be over 150 feet without having an apparatus such as these to allow the fire truck to turn around.
So if I'm looking at the 120-foot hammerhead, if you go up that T and turn right, does that mean you can't go more than 150 feet in that direction? Is that what the 150 refers to?
No, sir. Imagine you have a road that's 150 feet long. It's required to have one of these designs. If it's under it, it doesn't need to have it. For the fire marshal.
Okay, so how does that translate to the site plan that we have right now? Because I don't understand
Okay.
how that comes into play at all.
Got it. The PC requested a signed letter from the fire marshal.
No, don't repeat that. You're not answering my question. Can you show me on the site plan where that 150 feet comes into play? Because I don't understand.
Okay, looking at the site plan here, look at the northwestern portion. See that little red utility spot?
Hold on, I'm trying to find a compass bearing here so I know where the northwest, okay. Okay,
Now you see that road that leads to it and the road that continues west.
okay.
Now, if that road that continued west, that little small portion was over 150 feet, it would need that hammerhead turnaround style that's there.
Ah, okay.
But since it's there, it actually meets it and doesn't even need to be there.
So you're saying because that little stub past that T portion, because that does not extend 150 feet from the center of that turnoff going to that pump station, you don't have to have a turnaround, a cul-de-sac turnaround.
Correct. Per the fire marshal standards.
Mhm.
But the zoning ordinance requires no dead-end streets unless the TRC approves it, which it hasn't.
Okay.
What about that street on the southeast? Is that less than 150?
Per the scale that was given to staff, yes.
You say per the scale that was given to staff, you've got a full-size paper drawing of this and you've taken out a scale and measured it,
Yes, sir.
and we're under 150 feet.
Under.
Looks like it is, okay.
Let me ask you about, private versus public. Are these gonna be private streets or public streets?
From what I understand, private.
So Kurt and I were having this conversation, I guess, right after I was appointed, and even though I'd served on the planning commission before, I guess I was not fully familiar with the fact that when we do these new subdivisions, we don't have provisions to make them public. Is that right?
Yeah, please.
You could request that they're dedicated. The problem being that the city really doesn't have, we have like a mile of streets in the city and there's not really a desire to maintain more because we really don't have the staff or the ability to maintain the roads that we have.
It's, and here, no, because you've been in other jurisdictions like I have, where we've actively practiced serious planning law. It's just the strangest thing, I think, to have
Yeah.
these new subdivisions end up as private streets. Because how do you assure that they're gonna be long-term maintained? I mean, it's an incredible burden that's placed on the people that move there. And I'm willing to bet you that barely a soul that move into these new subdivisions have a clue that they're moving into a subdivision where they have the sole responsibility for the maintenance of these streets over time.
I'm going to disagree with you on that one because I live in a very new subdivision. We bought a lot here in Beaufort in 2016 and we finished a house in 2018. And that was one of the first questions I asked.
One of the smart ones.
And what I was told by the developer was that the city very much does not want to take on
I know.
another single street. And so our neighborhood, we are actually building reserves right now for street replacements that are going to be needed 2 decades from now. We're
Well,
building
and
reserves.
in my experience with hundreds of subdivisions I've worked on over the years is that among a sophisticated group of people and developers that come forward and tell the people this, they do charge enough in homeowners association dues and homeowners associations that take these things over. My mother lives in one of these back in Louisville. They just keep going up and up and up and up, but they're smart about it, but there are an awful lot of these subdivisions, like condominium communities and so forth that are created where people just don't realize what they're getting into. Now, I'm not trying to change anything here because I understand what you're telling me, Kirk, but I think it's really important that the commission and the public, as we go forward with these kind of subdivisions, not only understand that our local government doesn't take responsibility for these streets, which should be a public responsibility. But I also think that going forward, maybe not in this case today, we probably ought to be thinking about how we can hold the feet to the fire of the developer coming up, that the dues that they charge and the budget that they set are sufficient to do what was done. And what's the subdivision again
That I live in?
Yeah.
I live in a development called City
Oh,
Walk.
City Walk, yeah, good example. I mean, that they do like City Walk, that they have an adequate budget up front, that they charge an adequate dues, with appropriate maintenance and so forth for that purpose. Because otherwise, it looks awfully good today, but what's it gonna look like 10 years down the road when those streets start deteriorating? The other thing I have in that regard, even though they're built, as private streets, do we require that the streets be built to public standards in all cases or only in the case of?
I asked that question as well. I definitely asked that question as well. And what I was assured was that the streets in my neighborhood were built to the highest standards that would meet code and would certainly put them in good enough condition if the city ever wanted to take them over. But from what I understand, the city is not interested in doing that. Moreover, the last neighborhood I lived in, when I lived in the suburbs north of Chicago, we lived in that house for several years, and the homeowners association actually had to go out and take out a multi-million-dollar loan to resurface all the streets because nobody had built up reserves. And you are raising a very insightful, very noble point, but developers, and I've seen this over and over, when they start these neighborhoods, they're going to charge next to nothing for a homeowners association fee because it's a good way to entice people to build.
Well, competitive one with the other. So if one guy's charging $100 a month, the next guy doesn't want to charge $105.
Well, yeah,
Even
and-
though the appropriate fee might be $350.
Yeah, and that may or may not be enough to get somebody to buy a house in one development as opposed to another. But I'm not, you raise a very good point, but I'm not sure how the planning commission can put a tail on any kind of approval that would mandate that happen, because in particular, if we take this one as an example, I would guess that in 24 to 36 months after this place starts, the developer is going to be gone.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the conditions are here, but I think that the developer has an obligation to inform when they contract for each of the properties to let them know that the streets are private and they will be their responsibility for maintenance. The other question I have is, I don't believe that we have a requirement to build these streets to DOT standards.
We do not.
And
No one
I
inspects
think
the
that's
street.
another issue that
So
we need
that's
to,
Mhm.
we need to
something
take
you
up.
may want to take up later. I
We
think.
might- I'm not saying today, I'm
We
just
do
saying
bond
this is a
them?
good case to bring it up,
And-
because I've just been down this road before,
Yeah.
and I'm just telling you that these chickens come home to roost, and it's the government's responsibility, which we're part of the government, to make sure that these things are done right at the get-go, because even though I only represented private developers my whole life, I will tell you that all good people, but, they'll say what it takes to sell a lot in the end. And so it's our responsibility just to make sure that, that there is a high level of public, a high standard that we employ,
So, yeah.
in the construction of these.
So here, I'm just gonna be as upfront
Yeah.
because I'm used to what you're saying. We do not have, if this is not gonna be accepted by the city, the state, or the county, there is no standard that they technically have to follow other than just basically width and entrance standards. We do accept a bond, so they have to bond the value, so they do have to have an engineer estimate the cost of the road, but no one's inspecting the road and it's not built to any specific standard. And so if that's something you want to start thinking about doing, we probably need to put in infrastructure regulate. We obviously can do that, but then there's also the question of that's going to add a lot of cost, right? And someone's going to have to start inspecting that. So that's an additional thing the city's going to have to start figuring out how to do. But that's not been done. And from what I understand, this is the common practice in South Carolina that private roads are, accepted this way. And, that's just the common practice.
I do think we need to take a look at that, one way or the other, come to some conclusion that everybody's comfortable with. But I do think that we can condition that there is information provided in the sales package that these are private roads and the residents will be responsible for maintenance.
I don't know that I would condition on a sales package because that gets into a contract and I don't know that we can. I don't know that you have power and land use to get into private contracts for real estate. And actually our assistant city manager's here and he's an attorney. So, but you could make any condition about the road because you are the planning commission. You have, a lot of power over that in South Carolina. Like, right, if you want to condition how the road's built, any of those standards, you have the power to do so.
Yeah, I
Can we-
tend to agree on that. I do not think that we should put a condition that makes any requirements about developer disclosures to potential purchasers.
Right.
We, as much as we might care about consumer protection, we are not the Consumer Protection Agency. We're not sitting in that capacity here. And, leave it to the authorities to sort that out. I think we need to deal with the application before us and the code provisions that are applicable to the situation.
If you're not interrupting, Ryan, there's one more thing I should, go ahead.
Can we not put into the requirements, condition that the design calls for the road to be built to a certain DOT standard?
You certainly could. So I think the
Asking
important thing to note here is that in the process, which last month, we took a lot of regulations that's going to come back to you wherein they would have to do some engineering up front, and that you'd be hearing preliminary plats from henceforth, when those standards are adopted. But right now, with the sketch plan, they don't have to provide any engineered plans. So if you have this bite at the apple now, and you're concerned about this, you need to make it a condition now or to table this to, get those plans, just like you did last time. So I'm just, right, because right now they have only had to provide sketch level plans, which are all essentially undefined in the code for the most part. They have done what they're required to do, but you have a lot of discretion with land use, so.
Since I was going to raise this subject, I guess, just my own personal point of view at this point in time is that just because I think it's important to give some level of notice to developers as they come forward, what our expectations are. And I think, so I personally would probably be opposed to putting a bunch of conditions on this subdivision for the first time in this case. There's a very good chance that this developer's already planning to build these to state standards. But I would hope that after this case, from my point of view, we work diligently and quickly, if nothing else, just develop this planning commission a policy about what our expectations are going to be in future residential subdivision cases. So maybe even as it might take us a while to develop a regulation, we might have a policy that says in future subdivision applications, this is what we would like to see at the time the application is made. And that might include an anticipation that, what our infrastructure requirements are going to be, and also what our filing requirements are going to be. I was out of town for the last meeting, so I wasn't there during the discussion, but I did read everything that was submitted in the minutes and so forth. And I'm glad that the package is better this time than it was at time of submittal. And that's because this planning commission, said we want to see these various things. But I think we should start requiring them in all cases rather than on an ad hoc basis, because what happens then is a developer comes in with certain expectations, time-wise, for example, and all of a sudden they come to a planning commission meeting and the planning commission asks for things that, at least from my experience, I was always required or practically required to provide. And so I did at the get-go. And that way you don't end up with all sorts of delays. What we're looking at in this case is potentially even another delay in this case for the staff recommendation. Part of that is because we just have such a low standard in terms of our submittal requirements. And so we don't have to do that all in this case, but we might going forward, this planning commission consider what we want in all future cases submitted.
Yeah, we had a good 30 pages maybe of changes. I think really kind of surprisingly had already had those ready before the meeting. And so I think those went well with the city council. The city council asked us to prioritize those, but at this meeting, I think so you'll get another big packet. You already have 100, but we were going to get the historic, I think, resolved, and that'll be the next thing instead of all the rest that you have here that will get resolved. However, the street standards, engineering standards, that's a whole different lift, right? And that's a bigger lift, I think, than, what you're talking about. It's going to take some time, and that has to be something that, I think.
We could also just have, in the meantime, a sort of a policy statement from the planning commission saying henceforth, we're looking for these things as applications come forward, instead of just doing it on an ad hoc basis at these commission meetings.
I think we're resolving a lot of the stuff except for what you're referring to, and, and most jurisdictions out of South Carolina, you can't build a public street unless it's in a PUD, right? And that's the standard. And so if you're gonna develop, you gotta build to a public road and bond it as a public road. Inspect it as a public road, right? You know, that is not common in South Carolina. So if that's the direction you want to go, we can definitely create standards to do that. But I think we're going to need direction to do so because, you know, we don't have an engineer. We really don't have an engineering department. We don't have any staff to accomplish any of those tasks or maintain any streets or, right? So that's a big lift. But anyway, we'll leave it back to Ryan. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying perfectly. I think we're resolving half of it. The other half, you know, you have total discretion over land use tonight. So if you have an issue with the roads, you can definitely make a condition. Either they bring you basically the full engineering. Is what I'd recommend of basically the project. So they see how the drainage, how the roads are built, what changes, right? When you actually do the engineering from a sketch plan, you don't know that right now. You either need to do that or or maybe also, or either or, condition that the road has to be built to a SCDOT standard or a county standard. Which they could obviously get from those agencies and, you know, that would have to be something yeah. I think those are the two routes to address your question. I'm gonna leave it back.
Since I was shot down on the conditioning, can we at least go ahead and label these label the roads on the plans as private roads?
I think so, yeah.
That
At
way
least
there's no
standardized.
mistaking it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Don't disagree.
I have a question. I'm not 100% clear on exactly what the staff recommendation is. Again, our pages are not properly numbered here. We got a whole lot of page ones, but there is a page that the first paragraph is labeled Dominion Energy, and then there's a red box that has three points there. Is that the staff recommendation for today?
No, ma'am. It's,
Where is today's staff recommendation?
Right there.
It's the one with multiple?
Yeah.
Okay,
staff is going to recommend tabling today just because there's other issues that have not been fully resolved and plans have come in without giving us ample time to review.
So question relating to that, is there a specific reason why we're reviewing this again without having everything that we asked for?
Because the applicants couldn't get us to it in a significant time, but we still wanted to present it today because it got tabled. So we at least have to hear it at the meeting.
Okay. But they haven't gotten everything that we asked for, right?
Absolutely everything, no. And here we are with the preliminary grading and drainage plan. The three water areas on the north and southwest are labeled as bioretention, infiltration, best management practices. Along the main road, there are roadside swales with infiltration, best management practices. And the large pond to the south is labeled as wet detention. And the roads are labeled as pervious paving infiltration. And again, staff recommends tabling this request to ensure all the PC's requests are met.
Go back to the second slide,
Okay.
because that's the first time we've seen the developed site. Yep. Yeah, there you go. I don't know if these are accurate or not, but if I go back and I look at the little plan on the lot that you had shown, these look like they cover a whole lot more than that. I may be wrong, but
I'm sorry, what, could you repeat that?
the perspective looks like it covers a whole lot more land per lot than what that little sketch showed before.
Footprint of the house is filling the house lot greater than what.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just looks that way. It may not be.
As far as you know, are these houses covering, was it 70%?
No, sir. The pervious surface, including the driveway, is only 34%. The maximum in the zone is 70. Allowed to have 70% of the lots covered per the zone.
It's kind of misleading because a good bit of the back end of these lots is going to be owned by the homeowner, but it's going to be restricted from building because of those setbacks, right?
Yes, sir.
So you said
Oh, but the sides of the lots are not official because it's not platted yet.
okay. But the idea is to have the 70% max on each lot.
They're allowed to per zone, but from what their plans show currently,
Mhm.
but the average plot plan, only 34% is covered in total, including the like small sidewalk and driveway.
Oh, okay, so it's less than 70. That's, all right. You want us jump on to applicant's presentation unless there's anything else, any other questions for now for staff? Nope. All right.
Oh, wait a minute, I still don't,
Oh,
I'm still not clear on this issue about the road. Why can't we condition the roads to be built according to DOT and put it on the drawing? And just have them build it that way.
You can. I think you also have to understand that this applicants come before you where that standard doesn't exist. And so I think that's your decision here. I'm just trying to be, just trying to answer all your questions. I'm just trying to see both sides here, but it's a private street. You could require that. And the other thing to mention with that is that even if they were going to build the road to that standard, they wouldn't have to provide the engineered plans until the next phases, which are a staff-only phase. So that's why I'm stating, if you want to condition that, you probably want to see
Wouldn't do
an
that
engineered
now
plan.
because it's not gonna show up until the staff reviews the plans, right?
Well, I mean, this is your bite at the apple, so I think you need to make that decision. Is that fair or is that not fair? I can't answer that for you. I mean, but I can tell you that we have draft language that you'll see next month where it would become a public hearing. So from now on, and it would be you would be seeing that engineered plan here henceforth. It's just that all has to get approved and right now it doesn't exist. So,
I think your point was well taken, though. I think if in fact we follow staff's recommendations and table this because we have not had the opportunity to look at all the information, I think it's incumbent upon us to take a look at what those standards are for DOT in the county. And, at least come up with some preliminary determination of what we might want to require if we do.
So then we'll table it.
But I do have a question about Kurt, the statement you just made. First, you said we can condition the roads to be built to a standard, and then you said the standard doesn't exist. So I don't know if we're having
okay,
a
I'm sorry.
semantic
I'm
problem
sorry.
or
That's,
what.
yeah, I'm sorry if I'm complicating things. So, what you're looking at today is a sketch plan. So the standards for sketch plans, I think that's the struggle that everybody has been facing, is they don't really require too much. Engineered plans would mean that they've engineered like the drainage, the roads, the landscaping. All of that's been engineered on the site. An engineer, right, has looked at it all. How does this actually work? Well, that is not a requirement of your sketch plan currently, which is the only bite of the apple that you get for this plan. And so when we're talking about the roads, I'm saying, yes, you have the power to condition the road to be built to an SCDOT standard. However, right now in the code, just from the developer standpoint, they basically just have to provide a sketch plan. They do not have to do the engineering for this specific approval they're asking for you today. So again, you have the power, I think, to ask for it, which is going to, which has been sent to the staff. But in the defense of the applicant, they are not required to provide it to you. And I think that's why you're seeing some stuff come in like late, because this is not something I think they were planning on. Does that make sense?
The applicant is here and listening, so perhaps they can explain what their plans are as far as the.
I think it's their
standards for the road.
turn. And also you tabled this the last time, so we had to put it on the agenda. And so whether you decide to not hear it, you just need to make another motion to table or to approve it or disapprove it tonight. So.
I wanted to bring up one other subject matter related to if we do decide to condition it based on a SDOT or county standard. Yes, I do think we ought to take a look at those and see what they have to say. And there are different standards for SDOT that we can look at. The issue, I think that's the bigger issue, is the city of Beaufort does not have staff to review the construction as it's going in. I think if we require something to be done to a standard, it will be there. And if there's a failure at some point in time, then it becomes a legal issue.
Thank you. I'm Josh Tiller. I'm the applicant. I'm with J.K. Tiller Associates. We're the land planners on the project. And to address the road standards, the developer is willing to build these to SCDOT standards. That's what they always do. And they always let the homeowners know that these will be private roads and that we'll be responsible for maintaining those. We'd be happy to add a statement about that to the plan. So if that helps with, as far as a condition, we'd be happy to comply with that. Additionally, they do provide on-site during construction. They have reviews by engineers and geotech to make sure they are built to those standards. We did supply, and I don't know how much made it into the packet. As we got stuff, we had a lot to put together in a short amount of time, including an illustration. But I believe you did receive this plan, this updated plan with your package. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
So I'll kind of go through the changes there and hopefully I hit them all. Starting at the top end of the map, the north end, we did remove the gate. We weren't going to die on that sword. And we're okay with keeping this open and interconnectivity within the outside community. We did go through, we looked at all the specimen trees, and we highlighted those, and we worked that street, that main road coming in around those trees. Some of that road goes into the easement, but based on conversations with our engineer, we think we can work through that with the utility. Additionally, we shortened some of those hammerheads to allow for more tree protection there. We also widened that sidewalk to 6 feet from 5 feet previously. We added additional parking. I believe it was 7 additional spaces. Those go all the way around that waterfront park on the south end of the property. As far as the fire marshal goes, I believe he's good with our plan. We did those in lieu of cul-de-sacs. We felt that the hammerheads were a better option from just an urban kind of feel for the property as well. And I think let me go back to that sketch plan. Again, that sketch plan, not the plan, but this 3D rendering, it is an artist's interpretation. And I do agree. I believe those buildings might not be exactly scaled. They were based on some of the 3D models, but between this is brought into a 3D model through SketchUp, where they bring in our plan and then insert those buildings, those 3D models provided by the developer. So it's pretty close, but for the most part, it gives you a good feel for the overall impact of the development on the site. I don't know if there were any more questions from the commission, but,
Can I, jump in if you're done or,
well, I was, before I got to the engineering, our engineer isn't here, but he did provide, and I don't know if that made it into the packet or not. But he did provide this plan that kind of spells out how these BMPs are going to work throughout the site. But was there a question?
yeah, so on, I guess, looking at the site plan and also this, the 3D rendering, those 5 lots on the public street, are they fronting the public street, or are you planning on fronting it onto that private street?
Yeah, we went kind of round and round with that at the TRC meetings, and we finally landing on having those facing inward. And so the backs would face Harding Street, but that's basically where we ended up at TRC.
Because I think I would prefer, I mean, just commenting now, but we'll discuss it, if it fronted the public street with a garage in the back, but we'll talk about that. It could just be me. It's just my thought.
Okay.
Well, the garage won't be in the back, it'll be underneath, remember that. too.
Right, I mean,
Is-
driveway.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, these are all drive-under units.
And what were you thinking for the setback on those lots on the public street side?
Well, they would be set back from the internal street.
Right.
So it's we'd like to leave 20 feet to accommodate a car in the driveway. But we're allowed up to between 0 to 15. But the rear setback, depending on the model of the house, I mean, it's going to be over, I believe the setback is 10, but it'd be much more than that. It all hinges on where we place it up front with the front setback.
Rear of the house will be a 10-foot setback from Harding Street? Is that what you just said?
Not likely. That is the setback.
Right.
But based on the lot, if I can go back to that. This plan, if you see that front, I don't know if my mouse is showing up, but there's a setback line up front, that one's shown at 15. It's allowed as little as 0 under this zoning, but we're proposing 15.
So you need to have that setback to accommodate your guest parking and so forth. Your primary parking being under the house. You have added some space, some parking spaces along the streets as we asked. You didn't work any in on the northern side of the development. But it appears, if we can, I'd like to go back actually to that site plan, the individual lot site plan, if we
Oh,
can,
okay.
please. So even with a 15-foot front setback, you've still got a portion of driveway over the common property, so guests can park. It's sufficient for 2 guests to park so long as the owners are parked underneath the home. And that's in addition to the spaces that you've added along the street. Is that correct? I mean, is that the intent here?
Correct.
I think we want to make sure that the driveway allows for a car without it overlapping the sidewalk.
Well, that's important. And so how are you measuring that? Are you measuring that the driveway length
Yeah, that's
from
right.
you call it right of way, that's what it says on the plan, right of way, or, so usually the right of way is the end of the either public space, we don't have a public space there, or the, community-owned, roadway system. So I'm guessing where you're measuring those driveways, they start on the lot side of that, what you call right of way, is that right?
Correct.
And the length of that driveway is, in all these cases, is gonna be a minimum of what?
15 is the maximum setback.
Well,
But we-
what's the minimum setback for your house?
0.
I know that's what the That's what the code says. What are you
Right.
proposing?
We're proposing 15.
But really, that'll fit one car, not two cars.
Well, one side by side.
One side by side, but not stacked.
Correct.
Not all of these lots front a sidewalk, so that's not an issue on every lot,
Most of them.
but no, actually, I think most of them are not. Let's see here. Maybe half. So I mean, it may be necessary for the setback on those that front the sidewalk in order to avoid a car protruding into the sidewalk if it's parked out front, which it will be because even the owners will park in front of the house. And it may be necessary to adjust your typical lot site plan for those lots that do front a sidewalk to provide a bit more of a setback.
And this is more for you, Kurt, just in this regard. Again, this is just sort of an issue again that I've encountered, because communities have encountered this all over the place. Is when you have these reduced setbacks, you end up in situations where people end up having inadequate driveways. Sometimes any vehicle, but certainly the large vehicles, people are parking, everybody seems to be driving an F-150 nowadays or some kind of large SUV, and they just, when you have a 10-foot driveway, they end up extending over the sidewalks. And you don't find that out until the whole thing is built and you go back into the community, you can't utilize the sidewalks because these large vehicles are all parked over. So we need to, I don't
Yeah,
want to change the world.
So this is a form-based code issue. I think that,
Let me just finish.
yeah.
I'm not trying to change the world in this case, but I'm just saying this is a good case to see where these kind of problems can exist because of the nature of our code. And that's one of the things that, to jump on quick, or we'll keep getting subdivisions in where you've got these front entry garage situations with inadequate depths of driveways to accommodate the cars that people typically park there. So that's all.
Sure.
But
It
sounds like
is a
people are dealing with it.
complicated problem with this, I think that Benji kind of hit on, in the fact that, from what I understand, this is a waterfront lot. So form-based code basically doesn't allow a front-loaded product. And so that's why there shouldn't really be the issue here where you have a few feet of a car and the driveway not being long enough. But in this case, what they're proposing is essentially the front is the water. Yet for all intents and purposes, they'll act like a regular lot, except for these lots in the north.
And it can be a perfectly.
And so that I think is where you might need to think about this, because these lots here on the cursor, oh, you can't see the cursor. So, the lots on Harding, the lots next to that, the lots to the north of the detention pond would kind of be a traditional lot wherein this might be a problem. So those really should be alley loaded, for lack of a better term. And I think this plan doesn't do that. And so I think that's a question. Does that make sense? I mean,
All I'm saying is this isn't an alley something.
it is not, and they don't have enough room to do an alley. But
All I'm saying is it's not an alley something, alley access something. These will look perfectly fine. And it sounds like they're going about it the right way with driveways that had adequate depth to them. But I'm saying because of the fact that our code says that he can have a 0-foot setback, that means he can have a 0, 5, 10, and until you get up to 15 foot of driveway, you don't have an adequate driveway to accommodate a car. And so that's what happens is people end up parking in their driveway extending over the sidewalk because the driveways aren't deep enough.
yeah, I mean, the code's trying to prevent a front-loaded lot. I mean, I just want to be clear. And yet you have a situation where you have most of the lots are fronting the water, right, or fronting the open space. And so I think that's a little bit of interpretation, but there are 6 lots that I think you could make a good claim that there has to be some kind of a variation, right? Those would be the lots next to the water, because those will be traditionally loaded lots.
So would staff be able to approve those interior lots without a rear access for parking? Or a side or rear?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, we talked about it. I mean, I think probably the best thing would be to put an alley, but then you lose the buffer area to the lots behind, and it's a very narrow lot, so it's not an easy solution, I would say.
But we could condition that the driveways be a certain depth.
Yeah, or you could have the sidewalk kind of on the detention pond side, and that might take care of the problem. Just
Well,
as
so for
that-
example, you know, we requested that the sidewalk on the north side of the detention pond, of the storm pond, that sidewalk be eliminated. And the reason for that was because there are two big live oaks there to be saved, and they've done that. So in the case of those homes, I think the site plan that they're representing for the individual site works fine with a 15-foot setback, because there is no sidewalk there. But on many of the other lots,
It's hard to tell.
to the west of the pond, on the south side of the development, there's a sidewalk that runs all the way in front of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots. And those lots happen to be a little greater in depth, so there shouldn't be a problem on those particular lots creating a 20-foot setback, for example, to prevent an automobile from then parking over a portion of the sidewalk.
Well, that is an issue with the code, in the sense that the 15 is a maximum setback. Again, the T4 district is really meant for multifamily, commercial, higher density uses. They're supposed to be up against the street. But it does allow for single-family development. So that, you know, this is why this is a little complicated. So if you want to allow them a further than 15-foot setback, then I think the requirement would be they need to plat a
So
5-foot
15 is the
open
maximum.
space section for the sidewalk, or 6 foot, and then that lot can be counted basically from there. And then you've created a 20-foot setback. So I think that would be how we would,
We could just move the sidewalk away from the lot line, 5 feet.
I'm saying you'd plat it as an easement, and then we would take your setback from the easement line, and then we resolve this problem. Because they don't have the power to grant variances, that has to go to the zoning board.
That's right.
And so,
You're correct. The setback in the code is a maximum of 15 feet.
That's
So
right.
I see exactly.
and so I
what you're
think
saying.
what you need to do is condition those sidewalks on those lots, to be on a platted easement.
Yeah.
And that would give the extra, because, you know, you need at least 17 or 18 feet, so the car does not go into the sidewalk, so, that makes sense to you? Okay, I think we got that resolved. So if you are, one of you just needs to make that as a condition.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? All right, not for now. Thank you. Let's jump on to the public comments. Please come up to the podium. State your name and relation to the project, and if we could try to keep it around 5 minutes. Thank you. Or name and address.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Angela Patka. I'm at 18 Harding Street, just down the road.
Just spell your last name, please.
Yes, ma'am. Lopatka. I represent my husband and myself in our home, as well as several of the other of the neighbors in the neighborhood. Cul-de-sac Circle, Adam Circle, for those who couldn't be here. I just have a few things. The tree removal report, I understand that wasn't given at this meeting. But the paperwork that they submitted in the previous meeting, there were several dates on that of the specified trees, or specimen trees. The date that I saw was 1983 on there, on the bottom left. I'm not sure if that's the actual date of the plot, but you know, over 4 years, trees do develop and become more mature. Also, do we care how many trees, specimen trees are going to be torn down because of homes? Or we're just worrying about the perimeter? Because if they can build 37 houses according to the zoning, then we let them build 37 houses and not worry about the specimen trees that are where the houses are gonna be. Just my question. I noticed there were several other things not completed on their list. I just wanted to make sure that you all have all of your questions answered before approving this. I understand they're tabling it until they get all that to you, but I have a question about, there's currently a pump station on the main road, 18 Harding Street. And that red X up there, is that gonna be visual as well, or is it gonna be covered somehow? Because the pump station that we have is this big gated pump station, and I'm just thinking we're gonna have that, and then we're gonna have something that they're putting there too, and, you know, just a question about it. I had a question about the coverage of the trees for the lots that are on Harding Street. I think someone brought that up as well.
What do you mean by the coverage of the trees? I don't understand.
Like when you ride down Harding Street, you're just gonna see the back of these houses, or are they gonna have a buffer of trees? I mean, you can see some trees there. I was just curious
Yeah,
if,
I think, most of your, or some, what you brought up so far was the trees, like what trees are coming out, what trees are gonna be saved. I think that's, like information that we're still waiting for, that is on our list,
right,
like tree protection and all that stuff.
right. But I was,
And then as far as the front, Harding Street, we've also requested for a rendering of the entry, so that would probably include those streets fronting Harding, but just,
okay.
so I'm hoping we'll
'Cause
see.
they would be before the entry. It's just, I'm
Right,
just
yeah.
curious to know if,
No, that's a good point. I think that's something that's definitely needs to be seen.
also, I know that in the last meeting, they agreed to not go any higher than 35 feet. I think it was 35 feet. How do you ensure that they don't do that? Because once you approve them to move on to the next phase, then you don't really have anything else to do with this project, correct?
Well,
The staff carries it
Yeah.
out.
we'll put it in as a condition and the staff will enforce it.
Another subject that I've brought up several times are roads. As I said, they're very poor right now. And that floods when it rains or there's an extra high tide. Worried about additional flooding, but when they come in to do their construction with all of the vehicles, the roads are gonna get worse. Are the Harding Street residents supposed to be getting with the county to take care of that because they've gotten worse? Or will they also speak with the county to help pitch in to get them to do something with the roads, since their construction will be causing damage as well? I like to thank you for asking questions that are out of blocks that you don't normally ask about things that don't come up. And starting somewhere, because you have to start somewhere. So I appreciate you for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Torrens.
Spell your last name, please.
Torrens, Torrens. My wife and I live at 62 Harding Street. This particular drawing does not have the house number on, but it's, let's see, it butts directly against the rear of the development, proposed development. One question that just came up recently, there's a 35-foot height restriction on the buildings. Is that 35 feet from the current level, or are they bringing in 5 feet of fill? And so we're gonna end up 5 feet above that new height? Or looking out my back window, I want to know what to expect looking out the back. So that's a question for me. Last meeting, the question of a gate came up. It was not approved. It was rejected. I appreciate that. Also, there was a question raised about buffer between the neighboring properties and the development. The only buffer that I can see at the rear of my property would be the trees that are on my property. So if I decide to have a picnic under a live oak that's within my property on 8 feet within 8 feet of the property line, if I wanted to buffer that from the development, that would be my responsibility to put something there. That accurate? Okay. I'd be interested in seeing what they propose at the rear of the homes that are against the properties on Harding Street. I'm sure there's some kind of a setback there. A moment ago, somebody said perhaps there should be a driveway behind some of those homes, but I'm not sure which ones they were talking about. Beyond the setback behind those properties up against the woods, is there is a setback, and is there what's it called? Not community property, open space. Is that open space back there? I can't see from the plan what exists back there. I'm concerned that since there is a nature walk, I would prefer not to have the nature walk extending from the end of that street or that hammerhead there over onto my property. So are they planning on putting up a fence? Since they're not going to add any buffer, is there going to be a fence there? I've seen other communities like this where just over the property line, it becomes a great place to dump your yard debris, your grass cuttings, walk your dog, throw your coffee cups during your morning walk. So I'm wondering if there's going to be a fence around this community. I believe the developer would like to have it a private community, hence the original request for the gate. So I'm concerned about what, certainly the POA can adopt their own rules and regulations, but will the POA take responsible for anything that happens outside of that community if there is no fence? That's a question that, so I'd be interested in, as the plan develops, what happens at the rear of those properties? Is there a setback? Are they required to have a fence of some sort at at the lot line, or would that be up to the development at the exterior of the property? That's probably not within your purview here, but if they're doing another plan, maybe that could be shown. It shows the individual lot layout, but that's a waterfront lot, so it doesn't really apply to the properties at the rear. I believe that's all of my concerns right now. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
do appreciate your diligence on bringing up things that would not normally appear on a planning commission rendering, but I think everybody agrees that going forward, there needs to be a little better continuity between the various stages from planning and follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask Kurt a quick question? Since I've been off commission for about a year, do we still have the 3-foot fill ordinance?
We do, but the 3-foot fill would be for multifamily. And I think to answer some of his, it would be 18 inches for a single family. However, 13 feet is the you know, basically base flood elevation, anything under that. That's why I think they're gonna elevate, you know, the structures, right, and as garages. But it is, you know, basically base floor elevation is what 35 feet. So whatever that turns out, if it's 7 feet, if it's, they putting in 3 feet of fill, then, you know, it changes, right? So, yeah, I don't know that we know that right now with what we had, so. just answer.
Can you explain that, if you were saying?
Okay, so the city has adopted a flood ordinance and 13 feet is basically the baseline. So anything under 13 feet has to be flood proofed. And I think the applicant has already stated that they're going to basically go, you know, build the garages and build them up so they're not actual part of the house essentially, right? So that would basically flood proof them, for lack of a better term. Does this make sense? And then there is a
Have a
fill
flare.
ordinance also in our code that
We measure.
Measuring from the top of the fill or from the?
well, if they bring in fill, yes. If they don't, then, you know, whatever that elevation turns out to be.
And
But you would bring in fill if you need to, if you want to build the house up. In this case, I think you'd be looking at like 6 feet. No, they're not allowed to do 6 feet of fill, so. So I don't know that that's a,
So
go
I
ahead.
think elevation is a 35 feet startup.
well, it'd be whatever the base, you know, the elevation would end up being here. And so
Existing elevation or fill elevation?
whatever the fill elevation would end up being.
So
So they can bring fill, they can bring at least 5 feet of fill in across the entire site.
No, they can't build, they can't bring 5 feet. So I think 3 feet is really the max. So,
So then it would be 3 feet plus the 35 feet.
but I think you need to ask the applicant because I don't believe they're intending on really bringing much fill at all. I think they're intending on elevating the garages, right? And basically making them, you know,
I mean,
you don't have to flood proof that, right? You know, so it's, again, anything under 13 feet, whether it's fill or not, has to be flood proof under the city ordinance. However, the elevation doesn't start until whatever that average base floor elevation is. Hopefully I'm making sense.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was hoping for on this conceptual drainage plan. that
Yeah, but we
actually-
don't have, that's, you need to ask them. We don't have engineered plans other than what they've given you to know what that elevation is going to be. So again, I think you're asking really good questions on both sides, you know, staff, we don't know because they haven't been required to do it because it's not required in our code. And they don't know because it's not in our code for them to be required to do it. So I think it's not their fault as well. So I think so you need to condition that. It sounds like that's what you were trying to do here. And I don't know that that has been adequately done for anybody to
I
review.
mean, is there a part of the code where it describes what a drainage plan is supposed to have that we could reference for them to go by?
Yeah, I think you could require that it has to meet the loco, you know, low country, you know, drainage standards. And that's what we would review this based on because they'll have to meet it. So we'll send this to we do have a storm, you know, drainage engineer. And they do inspections, as you were referencing, like on roads. They do actually inspections during development and after development to make sure that everything was built to specific standards. So they just haven't been required to provide that. And I think you asked for that. That came in on Friday. This is Monday. Obviously, no one reviewed it, and I'm not sure I saw any topo or anything with what they submitted, to be perfectly frank. So the question you've asked, I don't think they can be answered tonight. Does that make sense? Hopefully I haven't overcomplicated everything. So.
I've got a couple of questions for Mr. Tiller, if I may.
Should we finish public comments first, or
I'm
can we
sorry.
do that?
Of course.
Okay. Is there any other public comments? Oh, there we go.
Good evening. Thank you, Council, Commission. My name is Diane Farrelly, 2415 Oak Haven Street in Beaufort, and I don't have any relation to this project specifically. However, I did see in prior minutes, then I've heard tonight about the 35-foot, and yet I see in this proposal 37-foot. So I just wanted to be sure that someone's taking a look at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other public comment? Is there any virtual public comment?
No, sir.
All right, we'll close public comment and open it up to discussion. Go ahead.
Mr. Tiller, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions, please. So in the package that you submitted, you have given us a tree and topo survey dated 2007. And I asked you at the previous meeting if all of the landmark and specimen trees were identified on your sketch plan. And I believe you answered in the affirmative that they were.
Yeah, I don't, which, was it 2007?
Well, that's what I'm looking at right here. I'm looking at a very old tree and topo survey, which was in our package. So all I'm asking is whether or not you have accurately identified all of the landmark and specimen trees on your
Yeah,
rendering.
and I believe that was based on a much newer tree and topo plan, survey.
Which unfortunately we don't have.
Okay.
apparently.
To the best of my abilities, yes. We went through, and drew out a grid on the property, went grid by grid and looked at tree sizes. And
Right.
identified both the specimen and landmark trees.
And you've made the adjustments that we asked you to make in terms of adjusting the roadways and so forth to miss a number of those trees.
Correct.
We've heard a concern about construction, traffic and so forth. So what, do you have some standard, for the entryway that you'll put in X amount of stone or something to keep muck from coming off the site and onto the public roads? Can you provide, typically there's just a small pad or something of gravel. Perhaps you could have a little bit longer or more substantial pad on this development since you've got a lot of trucks that are going to be coming in and out of this site.
That's my understanding.
Yes, good evening. My name's Stephen Baker. I'm representing K-Hop Nadian Homes. And those shaker pads that you're mentioning, usually they're about 150 foot long, roughly about 50 to 60, sometimes 70 foot wide, depending on the site. But yeah, 150 feet's the standard of what we do. And we provide a sweeper to be able to sweep up throughout the day in case anything gets on the road. We take care of it right then. That's the typical construction.
So as far as the elevation, you've got a fairly low site here. And so tell us about the intent when you actually have got all your infrastructure in and you're ready to start building some houses. How much fill are you going to put in on a given lot?
That's still to be determined based off the sketch plan approval so that we can move to engineering. Preliminary, we chose the drive under product so that we can reduce the amount of fill for this because
So-
obviously we don't want to bring in a whole lot of fill.
Right,
That
so
defeats the
assuming
purpose of the
you move forward with the drive under plan, what typically how much would you put down? 18 inches, 12 inches?
Until we get into the engineering, I can't tell you exactly. Every project is different. There's communities in the city, Overlook and Camilla Banks, where we're bringing in anywhere from 4 to 7 feet to get a buildable pad. On this particular site, I'm not exactly sure until we get into final grading and final engineering. Just based off, this is just based off what my understanding of the site is, I think right now the existing elevation is around 7. Typically, we like to have the finished pad at least 12 to 16 inches above the curb so that we have a proper drainage.
Right.
So if the existing elevation is at 7 and I have that road at 7, then the finished pad would be somewhere around 8, 8.5.
And so at that point, you would then measure the 37 feet for the maximum height of the house.
And that's the tallest house out of 4 or 5 floor plans that we have. That's not every single house. That would be our tallest. And I don't know if that's going to be the same house we built on every lot, but that's the tallest. It would not go higher than 37 feet.
all I had.
There's a loco drainage plan. Is that something you guys could provide?
The low country drainage plan, so.
Well, the challenge is they don't want to spend the money to do full civil engineering until it's kind of like the cart before the horse, before we get a sketch plan approval. Because right now, we're kind of looking at it at the 30,000-foot view. I mean, this is just the big idea. Once we get the big idea approved, then we move forward with civil engineering, and that's when we get into all those 10-foot height details.
So was your conceptual engineering plan was basically that PDF that had the red notes on it?
Yeah, that was from our civil engineer, Carolina Engineering. They went through and kind of just explained how they plan on addressing drainage on the property. It's not a full, grading 3D model and civil 3D design. But this is his professional opinion of how to attack this site.
And are you guys still going to provide the tree protection and tree removal plan and replacement plan?
Yeah, and that's kind of caught up in the same issue with the civil plans. Not until we get this sketch plan approval, then we can get into that. But we could show, and basically these green areas are where we're gonna preserve trees, whether or not what happens on the lot or within the road right away, what stays or goes, we
Well, that's,
can't answer that.
that's kind of part of what I'm worried about too, because some of the stuff that's not green is in the OCRM setback. And that's supposed to remain green as far as,
Yeah, we stop those lot lines at the OCRM line, and then there's a setback beyond that.
and you're not supposed.
There's no grading in there. Yeah. Our grading would stop at that setback.
So you're telling me that on this tree and topo plan, there's no way you could mark which trees is coming out until you get the,
Final grading.
Final
civil,
grading.
Final engineering. I mean, we'll be working with staff on that. They're gonna have full purview over those plans.
These ponds that you have, these BMP infiltration, bio retention infiltration BMP, several of them across the site, are they large enough to support the runoff from all the impervious surfaces that have been ultimately be part of ultimately be the development? Are they going to be able to contain that water?
Well,
Where's that water gonna go?
Well, I'm not a civil engineer, but it's not just the,
Are they large enough? Are there enough?
Yeah, we have to design the sites so that we don't have any greater impact to the surrounding sites than what is happening right now.
Okay.
So based off that information, the civil engineer will then design the stormwater ponds to have the capacity that water is released at the same rate as today or less, with higher quality than what's being released today.
and also there, in addition to the BMPs, there's pervious pavement throughout on these roadways. So, and I think he described that within this plan as well.
So I have a question. Comparing the preliminary grading and drainage plan, which is up on the screen right now, to the artist rendering, which was provided Friday. Could we look at that again?
I think it was the second slide, so bear with me.
Okay. So on this artist rendering, to me, it looks like there's a heck of a lot more trees on this artist rendering than on the preliminary grading plan. And I'm just kind of wondering where that came from. I mean, is the plan for the lots to prior to construction, to completely clear the lots to the lot lines as shown on that preliminary plan. I mean, here, it doesn't look like they got any backyards or front yards or anything on this artist rendering, which may be the plan, but to me, it's just a little hard. One of the reasons why we wanted this artist rendering is of the concern about mass and scale, spoken about by the members, the neighbors who spoke at our last meeting. And so we asked that you give us something that would address, the unknowns regarding that. And this looks very nice, but it looks very tree heavy, and I'm just wondering how accurate it is.
Well, this was based on an actual aerial, came from the county site. You can get those 3D perspective views of properties. And this was actually taken from one of those views, this angle, and he used that as a guidance for his sketch plan here.
But realistically, can you build a house like that? I mean, just kind of pop the house down in the middle of the trees?
Well, it's also shown at maturity, because people are going to plant trees. There's going to be street trees. Those things are going to mature and grow over time.
So this is 30 years down the road, 40.
Well, a lot of that, what you see around the edge, especially the marsh front, that will remain. That's part of that OCRM setback and that buffered area. That's not going to be touched.
So I think that just from my experience with these things is, don't ever assume that any lot is gonna end up having any trees on it. Only because of this, because the property owners end up controlling their own lots. And I'm not criticizing any developer for that. I'm just telling you realistically, don't assume that you're gonna have.
I'm not assuming, I'm
saying
concerned.
The whole world shouldn't assume that any lot will have any trees on it. Will they? Yeah. Some people will overplant, some people will prune their trees back. Because that's the only thing that, we can't control that. Now, we can control anything that's in the open spaces, so this colored up plan, as opposed to the artist rendering, is probably more accurate. Because this shows that outside of the lot lines, along the marshes and stuff, they're gonna be trees, and probably those are mostly retained trees, not planted trees. The other thing you see on here is those trees that are along the streets, those are in the right of way, those are trees that are planted in the verges. I assume you're gonna have street trees.
And this plan doesn't really show,
Oh.
regimented street trees, but
Right,
those
it
will
just shows
be,
a few.
they will be required as
Yeah.
part of.
But I think this one is a more accurate plan, and that doesn't look too bad to me at all. I think that the artist rendering is really pretty, but it's probably not realistic, and you can't count on it. That's all. And you're right, because you said that, you're only gonna have 30% lot coverage, right?
Well, at a minimum, it can vary, but we're not going to exceed the 70%.
Oh, not gonna exceed 70%, so, okay, yeah, you're not gonna necessarily have very much yard for people to plant. But it's a community that has a bunch of open space, right? And it's meant to be a community where you really don't so much enjoy much more than a patio, you enjoy all the communal open spaces, right? Which is a nice thing. So I think, I'm just saying that we need to be realistic about what we're seeing there. And we can't expect also that you can save trees on a given lot when you have up to 70% lot coverage. You just can't, all the grading that takes place. A lot's gonna be completely graded for all intents and purposes.
And they have no there's no house footprint in their library that's going to cover 70% of that lot.
Okay,
But
it could.
I don't see it being more than 50.
Yeah, but still the lot's gonna be graded.
Right.
It's just what happens, realistically speaking.
Except where you get into the OCRM,
Right,
the
right,
critical one.
Right.
I'm just kind of struggling a little bit with this tree stuff still. Is there a way you could overlay this into here so we could see the lots?
I think you would need to ask for a accurate tree survey. And that's what I was gonna mention. Because we spent an hour and a half so far, and we spent a lot of time last time, just in the interest of time. Seems like the critical issue here is that they're not going to be able to provide you any of the answers with any certainty until they do the engineering and provide a tree survey. And all of these things, and they're not required to in this section of the code. However, you do have the discretion to allow it. So I think tonight you need to decide, do you require this engineering and a current tree survey, landscape plan? So that can all be provided to you, or are you comfortable with what they provided, knowing that, that's not a requirement of the code? And then, or will that be enough next time if you're gonna table it now? I think that's the key to this, because once, I think the concern is the public's here, you wanna do the right thing, and once when it goes to staff, we have to follow the codes, so, a lot of the stuff is lost. So I think that's the critical decision, but because a lot of these answers, we're just gonna go like this all day, because until they do the engineering, we're not gonna have any, we're just guessing, trees, everything,
Right.
we're guessing.
So if we were to table it for purposes of getting more information, but we can't get the answers to any of the questions that we've been talking about, why would we table it? What would be the purpose
I
of?
think if you table it, you're gonna have to give them a condition that you wanna see engineered plans and a accurate tree survey. I think you need to make a decision, like, do you go to that further extent?
I think-
Because until they do that, you're not gonna get the information that.
I think that, I'm just throwing this out, we can decide in our motion, but I think when you get, a colored up rendering that looks like that, there's a fair degree of thought in there. I mean, I can see that the trees are outside the lot lines, there's a lot of trees there. If we ended up having a condition that said that the final engineered plans will look substantially similar to this, then that leaves it up to our trusted staff to work with the land planner and engineers to make sure that it does. And it gives them the authority to make that ultimate determination about substantially similar. And we just want to make sure that in the end, it looks pretty much like this. Because it's impossible right now, especially since we don't have a tree ordinance that we're dealing with, to get into what exact trees are going to be protected at this preliminary stage. But I think, so it kind of leads to a question to you, Kurt, is if there was a condition that said something like, the final engineer plans will look substantially similar to the renderings that, this particular rendering that was presented to us, you'd feel comfortable, would you not, in exercising that degree of authority? And if you thought that they weren't giving you what they had presented to us, you'd bring it back here, right? Or tell them to do a better job with trying to comply with the presentation that they did. That's a question, believe it or not.
I mean, it's hard because they don't have an accurate tree survey. So I don't know, right? Because it's old. It's over 20
I
years
know
old.
it's hard to make a decision today,
So,
but if they think they can get pretty close to this, then I'm just saying, if we gave you that as marching orders, then you could probably.
you could make a condition, I think, because we'll have to require a tree survey if you
Right.
pass this forward. I think if you made a strong condition that all trees are something saved or something of that nature, I think that's how you would have to deal with it if you didn't get, again, you either need to get the plans or make a very strong condition based on some faith that in the end it'll work out. So, I don't think it's anybody's fault here. It's not the developer's fault. It's not the public's fault. It's not our fault. Not your fault. It's just our code is not really set up, and that's why we're making these changes. It's, I think it's not doing, I mean, to be perfectly frank, it's problematic for anything other than infill urban development. And so doing this development, this code is not, I'm just gonna say it, this code is not, it's not adequate for a staff person, for a developer, or for you, or for a citizen to have any comfort that what is being proposed will be, in the end, what's built and built to a certain standard. And so I think that's what everybody's struggling with, and it's a lot of money to do all this engineering. They don't have, it's not in the code, so, right? So,
I think so you can understand our position. This is just a sketch plan. It could come in on the back of a napkin. This is kind of the big idea. Here's what we'd like to do. Do y'all think this is a good idea? Then we go do all the engineering. We get into the nitty gritty of grading and trees and all that. we've done our best effort to avoid trees and comply with the code and think about the grading and how much fill might come, but we just need to know if this big idea works, then we can take the next steps to get into the nitty gritty of how this works.
And I would put forth that if we were to submit a plan that did not accurately represent the approved sketch plan, then the qualified staff would say, this doesn't match the sketch plan, send it back. And our intent is to meet this approved sketch plan, because that's where all the efforts have been put forth to it. And I'm like Jeff, the sketch plan approval allows us to get into the nitty gritty and submit to staff an accurate set of plans to match the approved sketch, the pre-approved
We
sketch.
just
plan.
have to have faith in our staff. We're gonna do the job that we expect them to do that.
Or good conditions, you know, you can say that all specimen landmark trees on any open space or non-developable lot are, you know, preserved, protected, and staff can, or the applicant can maybe vary the plan to see that those projects are, or those areas are mitigated, you know, something like that to give a little bit of leeway to, you know, that's the best I can think of. That's, so you have some, so you just have to decide, right? Because all the stuff you're asking for requires engineering extra work. So you just need to decide, or you need to put a condition on it and trust that we'll work on it. Unfortunately, the public is just gonna have to do that as well. I mean, they can do FOIA requests. That's the best thing I can say. Until we change the code, which is next month, so.
So there's several kind of similar looking plans, and I'm not sure if they're just different sizes or whatever, but which document, how can we identify on which slide is the plan we would like them to make the development substantially similar to? I appreciate you holding that up, but what is the title of that document?
This is the revision dated June 7th, 2024.
Their title to it?
There's not a title on this plan. Just said, well, I beg your pardon. It says Marshview Estates subdivision plan. The update is June 7th. So this is the plan that they've brought to us in response to our comments at the last month's meeting with the revisions to the roadway and the protection of those trees that we identified previously. So this would be the most current. Is that correct, sir? This would be the sketch plan that you're going to try to build to.
This one here. One with the wing and the,
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
okay.
So if that's the plan, then if I may, I'll just sort of relate the conditions that I've written down, and there may be others that I missed, but there's a concern about a buffer along Harding Street, so perhaps there can be a condition on those 5 lots on the rear, that there be some sort of a buffer that we specify. The developer's already stated that they'll build the streets to the DOT standard. The issue of the height is a concern. And so 37 feet is what the developer has stated the maximum would be from the grade, the ground grade. The question is, what is the ground grade? Typically, they're going to have some fill, that the driveway underneath the house is going to be at X grade. I would say 18 inches sufficient as a maximum.
I would say once the engineer goes through his calculations, then we could put forth to this qualified staff of what that finished pad grade would be.
Well,
At this
I
time,
understand that, but we've got to make a decision. And so one of the concerns is the overall total height. So if you're going to wind up, if your engineers come back and say, no, we need to strip the site and bring in 5 feet of fill across the whole thing, and then we're gonna start building houses that are gonna be 37 feet tall, then that's gonna be a problem. So-
Yeah,
So
exactly.
what we're trying to figure out is how we get to this plan right here, and I don't see how you're gonna get to this plan by putting in that much fill, so.
Yeah, I would agree. I believe until we get into the engineer, I think 18 inches above curb for the finished pad height would be very sufficient.
Okay,
Okay, you're using one term curve and then previously
Curb, the road curb,
curb
the
of the
curbing.
road. But you said, the median elevation for the site you thought was 7 feet, which I assume is 7 feet above sea level. Is that
I
correct?
believe so, yes.
So why don't we express the height in a number above current median elevation stated to be 7 feet above sea level? So it's 7 feet plus 18 inches of fill plus 37 feet. So when we're talking about that, not to exceed 40 feet above sea level, something like that? Would that be a way to express it?
I believe we can work through that. That'd be something we had to work through with staff based off the condition. For sure.
You just have to be careful because I think they self-impose this condition, so I think you need to decide what condition you, because the code allows more. And so, yeah. These are individual lots.
I'm gonna just, about the building height, I'm not as concerned. You got a garage underneath and then 2 stories of living space above that.
Correct.
Each level's gonna be at least 10 feet. And then you got a space between them where you got
For
mechanical.
the floor system.
And you're measuring these to the peak instead of the mean roof elevation?
We measure them at the peak as well.
So you really can get a house in 37 feet measuring it to the peak?
Yes. That's our tallest floor plan. The other ones are less than that. Yes.
You got a real
Because
low
the drive under, is roughly 9 feet,
9 feet,
and then you have your floor system.
yeah.
So yes.
Another foot, and then you got 10-foot ceilings on probably.
And it all depends on the specs. We may do 9 and 9. I'm not sure what this building specs
and
are,
then
but I
you
know
have-
our
and then
hall
you
is
have a real low pitch on these, I gather.
correct.
Okay, well, that probably saves a couple, well,
And that's why I stick with curb, because where the road's not gonna come in at 5 foot above what's currently there. You know, it's gonna, the road generally follows the existing,
You know that without an engineering study?
typically, the roads follow what's existing there, because I don't wanna create a mountain. I don't wanna create a hill. I wanna kind of follow with what's there. So 18 inches above curb is more than plenty than what we need.
Curb, the 18 inches to bring it down into the.
the other issue was the driveway situation on those lots which border the sidewalks. So we need to make an allowance there for those lots, and I count either 15 or 16 of the 37 as being impacted, where you'd need to change the lot line so that we can have that setback so that we avoid parking over the sidewalk.
I think it was, I think we keep the setback at 15, but adjust the location of the sidewalk within the right of way to accommodate it.
Fine,
I mean, that's an
Fine.
easement.
fine. But let that be a condition that on those particular lots that front, that the sidewalk be adjusted to maintain an open 20 feet for an automobile.
There's a lot, they could just plot a bigger right-of-way section for the private road, and that'll, we could do a lot of things, but yeah,
Okay.
if you'd like to make that condition, I think that would.
You
be
understand
good.
what I'm trying to say? I'm just trying to arrive
On
at the
those on whatever lots that they
Right.
have at least 20 feet or at least 18 feet for, and we'll work that out. We'll figure that out. And then I think you talked about trees was a big thing, so. And you do have some conditions. I think you're following them all in your packets, but I think trees was the other thing I heard before.
How, was that all your conditions? I was gonna jump in on, okay. So the first one that you mentioned, the Harding Street buffer, you're talking about a buffer between these 5 lots and Harding Street,
correct.
right? Okay,
You mentioned that you wanted those to be front-loaded onto Harding. I
right.
tend to disagree. I think that
Okay.
they should remain as loaded off the internal street.
Yeah.
But,
We just have a continuous.
yeah, I mean, wax myrtles or something simple, you know, along the street which would get thick and, you know, hide.
And that buffer could remain intact so that there is no grading. But I agree with you. The houses should face interior so that we can leave a buffer along that Harding Street in the rear of the lot.
That buffer would not be on the lots.
Correct, correct.
What would
Um,
be the size of the buffer? As we know, skinny buffers aren't really buffers at all. What would you think, Mr. Trask?
I think, let's see, the rear setback is set at 10 feet. That's probably sufficient if they'll plant wax myrtles or something that grows pretty thick in there, would provide cover.
You're talking about a 10-foot buffer between the curb of Harding Street and the lot line, or?
The right of way of Harding Street.
And there's also existing, between the curb of Harding and the right-of-way line, there's existing vegetation that we can't even touch. And then the additional 10 feet on our side.
So what I'm I guess what I'm trying, since if we're going to put a condition, the condition needs to have parameters. And so what would be the size of the buffer measuring from the curb or the edge of Harding Street to where?
Perhaps just a sufficient screen left to the discretion of staff, with the intent that the 10-foot setback be fully part of the buffer.
Well, there's already a recommendation in the staff report that the landscaping along Harding Street shall be dense enough to block all dwelling visibility on Harding Street. So irrespective of how thick it is, how wide it is, the requirement is that you have to block the dwelling. So I'm not going to obsess about the dimension. The requirement is that you block the house visibility. You guys go figure it out. I don't feel it necessary to specify a certain distance as long as the ultimate requirement is met.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, but I also want to possibly, if you all agree, add a buffer between the development and the existing lots. So basically where they share a lot line on the north side, well, you know, this side.
Well, I'm not quite sure what that buffer would do, because if you look at the aerial photograph, to the extent that there are buildings that you can see on those lots, they appear to be already offset well away from the proposed new construction homes, well away. And I'm not sure what you'd be buffering. Or, And I have driven down that bit of Harding Street, and the trees through there, coming down Harding Street towards Adams Circle, those are very, very thick trees. You can't see anything. So I'm not sure why, you know.
Well, I mean, I guess there's a public comment about, you know, somebody, you know, if they want to use their lot more, you know, the back of their lot, are those new houses just visible, completely visible from the back of their lot?
I think I understand what you just said, but my point is, it's already the case that so if you look along Harding Street where it comes down towards Adams Circle, you look at the aerial photograph, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 roofs, maybe 6, and all of those are well away from the proposed new homes. And I guess my point is, if you planted a bunch of additional trees along that northern edge of the new proposed homes in that particular part of the development, you still wouldn't be any different in terms of seeing the new houses from where those existing houses are. If that made sense.
Be redundant, I guess.
Pardon me?
Are you saying it just be redundant?
Yeah, redundant's a good word. And actually, that is a good question. On the subdivision plan that you've submitted, along that property line there, you show a bunch of green puffs that I'm assuming are trees. Is that intended to show trees that are already there or trees that, because it's off, those trees are off your property. Are you just showing trees that are already there?
It's just an illustration. It's based on the existing tree canopy.
Okay.
It's not, those aren't new trees.
That's what I thought. So if you did plant new trees, they'd be competing with the existing very mature trees. I don't know.
What's the rear setback on those properties? Do you,
10-foot minimum.
10-foot minimum? So, we could go ahead and just say that we want a 10-foot undisturbed buffer at the rear of the property.
So is there any other conversation? I'd like to make a motion unless the committee has other comments.
The one question I have about the build the roads to SDOT standards. I'm not really very familiar with SCDOT standards, but I would assume there's different standards for different types of roads.
Yes.
Do we have to specify what standard we're talking about?
I think they know, I think they have a common standard for a public street,
Yeah.
and you'd be satisfied that it's adequate.
Yeah, I would be if it just said, you know, South Carolina DOT standards for a residential street. As long as I know that exists, I'm confident that that would be fine. I don't know, we need to give like a statute number or anything like that.
Would that be sufficient for staff to work with?
One of the comments that was made by the public was that they were asking about a fence around the property. Do you intend on putting a fence around the property?
We do, the HOA will allow the fence. We have not discussed if we're gonna encompass the entire neighborhood with the fence. With it being, you know, on the waterfront, that would be kind of hard to do. But we will allow fences for sure. So those homes that are along that wood buffer.
Much around the waterfront, but that properties that back up to your property. That's what the public is
Right.
asking about.
I don't think we want a fence around this development personally.
I would agree.
And we can,
I would
unless,
Bringing something up public where.
no, that's right, and you're correct about that, and so that's something that we need to flesh out, because that can certainly be a condition, but it seems to me that putting a fence around this community is not the right thing to do.
I think we got a motion, and so if you want to discuss the motion, then the original motion maker needs to accept it, right? And then it
Okay,
needs
well,
a
I'm
second.
going to make the motion if there's no, that's what I'm asking. Okay, so I'd like to move that we accept this sketch plan dated June 7th, 2024 with the following conditions. A buffer against Harding Street, as staff has recommended, so that the structures are not visible from Harding. The streets be built to SCDOT standards. That the height, that the amount of fill not exceed 18 inches, and that the overall height of any given structure not exceed 37 feet from finished lot grade. That the lot line adjustment, and I'm not exactly sure how to word this, relative to the sidewalks. Kurt, you help me out on that. The concept being that those lots with the fronting the sidewalk are not impacted, that the sidewalks be adjusted to provide a parking 20-foot area in front of the house.
All lots that have such a condition shall provide at least 20 feet of driveway length. There you go.
The final condition I'd like to offer would be that the trees that we've identified and that they have avoided with this sketch plan, that the tree protection standards that the city normally maintains are in fact maintained throughout the construction period for the development.
Did you want to add Mike's suggestion of a 10-foot undisturbed buffer behind the lots that do not,
I was not going to suggest that because I think that area is sufficient as is. So that would conclude my motion. Yeah, that the site plan ultimately produced and engineered is substantially similar to what we're looking at, this sketch plan.
Let me clarify that last omission that you had. If you agree that you think what's there is sufficient, then it would be reinforced by saying that the 10-foot undisturbed buffer along that area is exactly what you just said, and would not allow for anything being done in that undisturbed buffer.
Yes, so all areas outboard of the critical line are left undisturbed, obviously. And any areas within the rear setback are also left undisturbed within the 10-foot setback.
If I understand it, you're saying the last 10 feet of the lot, or that there just be a common 10-foot open area at the rear of those lots?
Well, I'm speaking to, since most of the rear of these borders the OCRM area without exception, so we've already addressed the ones on Harding Street. So the only ones in question are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lots that border the north side of the adjoining property. 8 lots, actually.
So, yeah, I'm kind of confused on that too.
He's talking about.
So it'd be a 10-foot setback
If
from
I'm
the
okay with
property
doing
line.
it.
Oh,
no, is it a
This is a
10-foot
10-foot undisturbed buffer.
from the lot line or from the property line?
So it would end up being a common area, it would be a common
Yeah.
community property, there's a community strip of 10 feet along there, is that what you're saying? It's outside the lot, the given lots.
The back of the property.
So-
would be
so it's-
10-foot undisturbed.
Paul, it sounds like you've made a motion, and so you either need to accept, it sounds like you either need to clarify that I think everybody is asking for a 10-foot open space buffer area between, basically this and that.
Well, there's a, yes, there's,
That northern, the area north of the detention. That
way I see the
border.
code
All the
sheet.
way.
Code sheet requires a 10-foot rear setback, which would apply to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lots against, on the north side of the development opposite the storm water pond, okay?
That's I think what the discussion is, whether you have to entertain it or not, is that's a setback. I think they're asking for an actual platted area, a 10-foot
was-
open space buffer area. So if you don't accept that, then we need to vote on your motion if you're not accepting
Here's
that.
what we're trying to-
So,
Yeah, the question was only whether it's a 10-foot common strip
yes,
that's
or
outside the lot.
part of the
lines,
lot.
Or whether it's an undisturbed area within the lot lines. I think it becomes a little bit problematic on those 2 lots that are actually side yards as
Yeah,
opposed
yeah.
to rear yards.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
right.
And so I think originally that's probably why you, Paul, were suggesting.
Yeah, the side is only 5 feet. It's only
Yeah,
a
I
5-foot
think,
setback.
I think that's probably why you were saying along that north line, there not be any undisturbed strip, just because it's hard to fit it there, I think, at least on those 2 side yards.
That's right.
So I think you need to either clarify your motion or they need a vote on just.
Well, I'm sorry, I may have misspoken, but I did not intend, I did not intend because I think that a buffer there under the current circumstances with the location of the existing homes on Harding Street there don't really require a buffer on that section.
Then you need to I think there needs to be a second of the motion, and if it fails, then a new motion has to
Right, so that is the motion. Is there any questions or clarifications, or is there a second?
So does does the motion include this 10-foot thing or not?
It does not.
Okay, I'll second it then.
Well, can I just ask one more clarification? As to the height, um, you describe the height as, 37 foot from the filled lot with a maximum of 18 inches of fill or lot grade
Mm-hmm.
to the peak.
Hmm,
Is that
correct,
correct?
yes.
Okay.
All right, so we have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay?
Yes.
No.
Benji, you need to vote.
Oh, I said no.
So there's 3 and 3. Okay, okay, so then the motion
Right.
fails. And
So I
so
think, how many
There's,
yeses?
there's 7 of us.
3 yeses and 4 nos that I heard. You might need to do a roll call.
Okay, raise your hand if you said yes, please.
Okay. Okay,
So motion passes.
motion passes. Okay. All right.
All right, thank you.
Can we take a short break before we move?
Yeah, sure, 5-minute break for everyone.
Yeah, I told you they turned the air off.
There'll be a whole public meeting, so whatever they submit.
Next time. it's my-
Or we just like a squeaky one.
Make sure. Mike does that.
All right, let's get this started. So we are on the Holman draft revisions to demolition ordinance.
I'm not gonna waste your time presenting more, but you have the Hallman draft, and then I put the Hallman draft into the code that's in red. And so I think that was everything you discussed. I think Mr. Hallman did a pretty good job with it, and I think either one of us can answer any questions. And if you do this today, if you make that recommendation, we can then send it to just this HRB section to the city council, and they can have we'll have to have 2 readings on it, so.
But
Answer any questions.
before we dive into the Holman draft, just because we had problems with the minutes from our last meeting due to technical issues, who seconded Mr. Trask's motion? I didn't hear. Okay, Mr. Holman, thank you very much. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
We can go through all this, or I don't know how you want to proceed, but I think
We've
Mr.
all
Hallman's
read through it. pretty
accomplished
much.
everything he asked to be done, so.
Yeah, I think I mean, the only thing that I wanted to comment on was that first sentence, and I don't know if it was just me, where it says approving the demolition of a contributing or non-contributing structure in the historic district, which I guess, I don't know, we could put in parentheses, which includes the preservation district and the conservation district.
I kind of assumed that somebody would massage that so that it says the right thing, and I don't know necessarily how to say the right thing, so no pride in authorship there. Whatever it needs to say to address the right spots in the city. I'm happy to have staff fix that. Passing the buck.
I think, yeah. I
Okay,
think
let me
it's-
just go to that real quick. So you were stating. For the preservation, I think it should just read historic district.
Which is both, yeah.
You're just saying it should be the historic district
Where exactly are we talking on this draft?
here? First. The
The
first,
very first sentence.
right out of the box.
Page 001.
Well, they're all,
They're all-
numbering didn't work.
It's section, it's the start of section 9.10.
It's behind the Hallman draft revision.
It's section 9.10.
I'm just trying to keep you on your toes,
I believe it should just say any contributing or non-contributing structure in the historic district, period. The historic district includes.
Yes, historic district would be
Yeah.
the
So
preferred
the
language.
the preservation district is a subset of the historic district?
Yes,
There's no other territory in the preservation district?
It's just a clarification.
I believe I actually updated that if you go to demolitions. I actually did fix that already. So if you go to demolitions, it's page 5 of 10. So it's right after the Hallman draft. I put it into code form, and that's that section. It says inclusion of Hallman draft into draft ordinance. And then if you notice the purpose in it, I already had changed that just to the historic district. So
Page
that
is
might
that?
not need to be changed.
Oh, okay, you got it there.
Mm.
You got that one? 5 of 10 in red.
I think I naturally did that. I'm sorry. I think that was the only edit I think I made, other than
Here.
putting it in for the,
That's
I
it,
do.
there. No.
does that make sense? Does everybody see where that is?
Yes.
It's also page 001. There's a lot
So,
of-
so should we just for, since we're gonna be flipping pages here, may I suggest that we pick whether we're gonna use the Hallman draft version here that has the green, or if we're gonna use the one included in the code, just as.
Well, I think you have to,
In the code or not?
you have to put it into, this is just putting the draft with that only into the code language, into the code section.
Let's use the bit that's in the code, because that's what it's gonna look like at the end of the day.
I think that makes a lot more
Yeah.
sense. So use the one with the red revision.
Okay.
Okay.
It is a tabled many time public hearing, so you should probably ask for citizen comment if
Oh, right.
you're done.
Is there
discussing
any
or
uh,
sometime.
public comment? No, hearing none. Are there any other discussions? Otherwise, could we get a motion?
I move that we accept the revisions as prepared by staff, reflected in the package materials with the red revisions titled Inclusion of Hallman Draft into the Draft Ordinance, and present that to City Council as our suggested revisions to the code.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
You can ask for any.
Sure, yeah, we can discuss a little bit more.
I mean, I'm fine with it all. The only comment I want to make is one I made, but several of the prior sessions. I don't have a problem with the Holman draft demo ordinance. I think it did a lot of good work on it and it's excellent. But it does make it very, very difficult, if not impossible, to remove, you know, really severely dilapidated structures that are, you know, they're about the only way we're gonna get rid of some of those is if they blow away in the wind. And that could take, you know, many, many years. Now, I know that the intent on Historic Beaufort Foundation is to, you know, if somebody doesn't come in and do something with the structure, then it will just stay there until it finally rots on its own foundation and blow away in the wind. And I've heard that phrase used before in my life. Here's my only point, is we do in this city have a property maintenance code. It's not being enforced. And I understand some of the reasons why it is not being enforced on people that can't afford, you know, upgrade their houses. But the structures that are abandoned and that the owner simply, for God only knows what reason, is doing nothing with them, not even making the effort to file for demolition. They're just letting it sit there and rot on its own foundation. I am just hopeful, Kurt, that you can, in your position, talk with the city council and the rest of the city administration on enforcing the property maintenance code, at least starting with the abandoned structures, those that don't have anybody living in them. Because if they did utilize that ordinance properly, they could end up putting serious liens on those such that then the city could condemn the property ultimately, could condemn the property ultimately, and then put the property up to the best bidder. It might be somebody who only offers $1 for it, but it'll be somebody then that the city, it can be assured, will take that structure and bring it, not just bring it up to code, but in some cases may actually turn it into a very nice rehabilitated historic structure. But the only way that's gonna happen is if the city proactively utilize this opportunity to say, no, those structures can't come down, but we're going to enforce our property maintenance code against them. And under those circumstances, which I'm hoping the city will do, then I'm in favor of this ordinance. And that's all I wanted to say about that.
I probably talk way too much at this meeting, but, as of today, a memo, in conjunction with HPF was sent to, the city manager. That in February, there was an effort to get together and to look at all those dilapidated structures and to think about a program. And the last 5 months, basically our architects, building inspector, code enforcement, myself, although I'm not sure what value I have with this, but and then HBF and their architect and their experts, their preservationists, all toured all of these and did a structural and architectural and historic assessments of every single structure. We also, since our code enforcement officer has good relationship, talked to every single owner of all of these structures. And we've proposed a plan and there was some money put in the budget. And I think there's a lot to be discussed what comes out of this, but we have analyzed and basically ranked the properties in need. The properties that need stabilization, that could qualify for renovation and could qualify for aesthetic, maybe just need some aesthetic changes to brighten the property up because they're structurally sound. So we've looked at all those properties, we've done all that, got them all ranked. But that's all ready to go, so the next steps will occur. And, if maintenance or things of that nature arises, then, we'll do something. But I can tell you that has now all been done, and now, we'll see what comes of that effort.
And my concern is those where the roof is collapsed, the tree is
Growing up in
through
it, yeah.
Yes, we're very aware.
And I'm not advocating that the taxpayers bear the responsibility of improving those structures. If I own a building and I choose to just let it completely fall down, I should be the one that's responsible for that, not the taxpayers of the city.
I understand this is and it's a very complicated situation with all of the factors involved. You got a lot of errors properties, you've got a lot of, there's a lot involved with this. And I think we're going to try to figure out, now that we've done this work, we'll see what comes of it. But that has been done at least, and we'll see what comes of it. That's
Some
what
of them are complicated,
some can be very simple, some can be exceptionally complicated.
I agree with
so. But yes.
Yeah, all right, so yeah, we got a motion, we have a second. We'll continue with this motion all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
So Kurt, I have a question. With the demolition bit done, what would be the next part of the code that we're gonna take a look at?
Okay, so you have another, I was gonna say that, so you have another 180 pages in front of you. And you have, the 40 pages we were talking about last time. I did not include that in that packet, and we have the whole tree ordinance, which is also a pretty major lift. Didn't feel like tonight we were gonna get to any of that, and we just really wanted to focus on this historic. That's why it was listed there, but we included because it's all been tabled. So the next phase next month will be basically the infrastructure and plating, this preliminary plat, all of the sketch plan, all of those requirements you've been asking for. We are going to prioritize those next month and talk about them, then the trees, and then basically all the rest of the code that you've seen for the last 4 or 5 months. That's been determined. I think that is lower hanging, that is of least importance. So the first thing, so next month, expect to see the preliminary, all these plat infrastructure standards coming to you. And then the month after that, the tree standards.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And then we're gonna seed it to the housing impact.
Instead of printing this whole package every time, could we just limit it to what we think we could digest in one meeting?
If you're ready to do that, yeah, we could just, maybe a formal motion to table or you'd like to, okay, I guess I don't need a formal motion. We'll just still list it on the code, and we'll just not include the rest of that, and we'll just include
What's the next topic we're gonna cover?
we'll do plating and development standard.
Okay,
and
send us
infrastructure
planning and
standards.
development.
All right, and so now I'm gonna turn it over to JJ for the housing impact addendum, essentially, to the comprehensive plan. So we'll just resume with all the changes next month.
All right, sounds
Kurt,
good.
I have a question. I know that the city council has been working on a procedural code for, I'm not sure what the correct term is, but procedure for for various things that they've been doing. A, what is the status of that? And B, is that going to be applicable to us?
No, yeah, actually, he can address that, but, I think for you, if you really want to address like rules of order and stuff, you could just merely adopt the Roberts Rules of Order. I mean, we're following that, I think, and there's 3 attorneys here, so, okay, hey, he's got it solved.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is JJ Sauvé. I'm the Assistant City Manager. I started here in January. This is my first opportunity to be here in front of you. I apologize for not getting up here sooner. I think I've gotten to at least shake everybody's hands. Before I jump into the housing impact analysis, Ms. McFann, to answer your question, the City Council Procedures Manual was adopted by resolution at last week's council meeting. And it does apply, as far as the rules of order, it does apply universally to all of our advisory boards and commissions. So we're hoping to take that and start working with our boards on some training about that. And it does defer to Robert's Rules of Order, if anyone's familiar with that. Do you have any other questions about that particular manual?
Is the document ready? Is it complete? And
it-
if so, would it be possible to email all of our commission members with a copy of it?
Absolutely. It is on the website as of this morning, and have a hard copy. And y'all all should be getting hard copies as well, but we'll make sure those get out to all of you. Anything else on that?
One other issue, and maybe it's related or maybe it's not,
Okay.
but I like to listen to the city council meetings and the work sessions on Facebook, and I'm hearing a lot of commentary about the quality of our minutes. Including Mr. Trask had a comment at the last, I believe it was the city council meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Although I believe he's voted to approve all the minutes that we have had of our commission so far.
Yes.
That said, I agree that there's an issue with relying on recordings, because just last time there was a real problem because the recording didn't
Planning
kick
Commission,
in
yes, ma'am.
until well into our meeting. So we were left with having to just sort of generally refer to some citizen commentary and so forth, which is an issue. On the other hand, historically, the minutes that have been kept by, I think, every city board, and if it's different, correct me, but my understanding and based on my knowledge is that they're pretty minimal minutes. There's certainly not a transcript or anything word for word. And that's one of the beauties of the recordings, because you can get a lot more information from the recording than you can from just looking at the minutes. I am the secretary of this commission, and so I do feel like I have a responsibility about the minutes, and I always ask the staff member, Julie, who prepares them, to send them to me before she circulates them. That did not happen this last time. I didn't get to review them before they were circulating. There were a number of errors in the draft, but we eventually caught them and they were fixed. But still, there was the problem of the lack of recording. So I have been, relying on that as other people do. And I don't know what the solution to that is. I think that the criticism of the lack of detail in the minutes is in some cases well-founded. However, we don't do transcripts. We used to have somebody in the nature of a court reporter taking down and actually doing, that type of a transcript. We don't do that anymore, I assume, for budgetary considerations. And so we do rely on the recording. So I just wanted to raise that because I care about the minutes. I do think it's important that the minutes be as complete and accurate as possible. I know that it was discussed by the city council as far as their minutes go. Anyway, if there are suggestions about how better to do the minutes, as secretary, I'm open to hearing them. I'm happy to work with anybody who has any better ideas than I do, but I do try to take notes, and today I'm following up to even on somewhat ministerial things to just try to make sure I got the names right in case for some reason the recording disappears before we have to approve advance things. But I just wanted to say something because I share Mr. Trask's concern, and it's not just his concern. I think a lot of people share that concern.
Yes,
that
ma'am.
Minutes could be more detailed.
Yes, ma'am. So to that point in particular, I came from North Carolina, so I'm still learning the South Carolina way of doing things. I tell all my colleagues back there, this is the Wild West when it comes to law and local government. It's good in some ways because we have a little more local control on things. We are looking at a records retention policy that would address the video and audio recordings beyond the 2-year minimum that's required at the state archives. I think council, all the meetings I've had with them tend to share those same concerns about the records needing to be retained much longer than 2 years. As far as the minutes themselves go, the recommendations from the Municipal Association and the Association of Counties in South Carolina is a little different than what I'm used to. It is a more broad summary of action items than what I'm used to. And we're looking at that and how best to address that moving forward. But that's kind of two separate issues, the records retention and then the minutes on the other hand, but we are looking at that.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to updates on that, because, you know, we're working hard here and the citizens come and they have their concerns and we do want to make a good record of,
Yes.
of what we're doing.
Oh, absolutely. Well, from a legal background, which I know several of you have, can be absolutely critical in defending city decisions, that we have good minutes and that we have good recordings. I share that concern as well.
I think you've been doing a good job so far.
Well, thank you.
I'd like to say just one thing in response and not to get too deeply into this issue, but our minutes are quite excellent. The issue of the minutes, according to the statute, is that they have to contain the substance of what people say. And they have to be kept in perpetuity, the written minutes. These recordings are optional. What council has done is to see fit to rely on they put a disclaimer on the written minutes and they rely on the recordings, which are maintained by Facebook. So I think that's wrong. And I've said so at council meetings, and I'm going to continue to say so as they develop their policy. But and I illustrated the fact with some of our minutes to show that our committee minutes are superior and are properly kept in writing as opposed to minutes by council these days.
I was going to bring that up. He actually did use a copy of your minutes as an example. Any? For those quality minutes? Gotcha.
These
Right.
minutes, Mike, when we were on the planning commission met together, our minutes were never anything close to these.
They were deplorable.
They were horrible. These are the kind of minutes that we were wanting to see.
Yes.
It looks to me like we now have, so I would commend Kimberly and whoever else.
We had a meeting with me and just elected, told, we've elected to do regular minutes. Good, I'm sure Julie will be happy, so, but yeah, that was an election, but this.
Any questions about policies, procedures, minutes, or anything else before we jump into the housing impact analysis? All right. Well, again, my name's JJ Sauvé. I'm the Assistant City Manager. Joined the city in January of this year, came from North Carolina where I represented local governments. And I want to thank all of you for your service. As I'm learning more and more about planning and zoning here in South Carolina, you guys have quite a job. And I want to make sure that that we on the city staff side do everything we can to support the work that you do. Some background on this particular issue is in 2023, the South Carolina State Legislature enacted Act 57, which modified our accommodations tax code or statute at the state level. It adds the option for municipalities and counties to expend up to 15% of state accommodations tax for workforce housing. That's just another tool in the tool belt. It requires, before any funds could be allocated, it requires that the local body adopt a housing impact analysis as an appendix item to the comprehensive plan. If you go back and look at our comprehensive plan that was completed in 2021, some of you, I'm sure, had a role in that. We've had a lot go on since 2021, and 2021 was kind of a crazy time when it comes to our real estate markets, financing, and housing in general. So that's actually something that you're going to hear me keep harping on, is that as we come up on that 5-year mark for the review of our comprehensive plan, I'm going to be looking forward to working with Kurt and his staff and this commission in updating certain parts of that, including the population and housing. I think there's a lot of information that needs to be updated in the underlying document. The steps in this process, May 2023, Act 57 became law. There was a lot of confusion about just what was necessary here and what those funds could be expended on when it comes to workforce and low-income housing. In January 2024, the Municipal Association of South Carolina held their annual legislative meeting in Columbia, and they used Hilton Head Island as a model. They provide us with a guidance document from the South Carolina Attorney General's office and the Hilton Head Islands impact analysis that they had a contractor complete. After several conversations with the staff at Hilton Head Island over the past few months, we collected the data and compiled it into the housing impact analysis that you all have in your agendas. The specific items that have to be included in here are in Section 4 of the Act. That's information about the effect of the ordinance on housing, including the effect of the ordinance on each of the following: cost of developing, constructing, rehabilitating, improving, maintaining, or owning single-family or multifamily dwellings, purchase price of new homes or fair market value of existing homes, cost and validity of financing to purchase and develop housing, housing costs, and then density, location, setback, size, height, development, lot, parcel, land division, or subdivision, if that's not already been identified in your planning code. Analysis of the relative impact of ordinance on low and moderate income households, and regarding any financial impacts, if a local government determines that it's not possible to make a specific cost estimate expressed in a specific dollar amount, the analysis must include a statement setting forth the reasons for that local government determination. Once it's developed, copies are provided to the legislative body of the local government, the Department of Revenue, and the Tourism Expenditure Revenue Committee. So that's the point we're at in this process, is that here in June of 2024, we have this public hearing today in front of the Planning Commission, where the commission can do one of several things. You can ask me questions, we can talk about this, and you can, if you feel comfortable with this being an appendix item, you can recommend that council adopt it as an appendix item. You can table it if necessary, and we can come back and look at things, or you could outright choose not to adopt it as or recommend it as an appendix item. The plan is next week, or if time does not permit due to the agenda, the first week in July, July 9th, to present this same plan to council in a work session where there will be an opportunity for additional public comment and input. It will also be provided to those state agencies that I just identified, the Department of Revenue and the Hospitality Tax Group. If council and the Planning Commission both agree that This would be an appropriate appendix to the City of Beaufort's 2021 Comprehensive Plan. We would give a 30-day public notice for our August 2024 meeting, and there would be an additional public hearing at the council meeting, and we would have a first reading, and then in September of 2024, second reading of the ordinance, and that would actually adopt the housing impact analysis as an appendix item. And then a little further down the road in fiscal year, calendar year 2026, I plan to be back in front of you. Hopefully, we've got all of our code updates done at that point with Kurt, and talking about some updates to the underlying comprehensive plan. At that point, we should have about 5 years of post-COVID data. We see the market hopefully starting to settle a little bit, and hopefully the next couple of years will provide us with some more level numbers. And again, this whole process is not that housing is not important, it's incredibly important. That's why I keep bringing up going back to the underlying document. But we do want to join Bluffton and Hilton Head and some of our other, some of our other municipalities in the area in looking at options for funding affordable housing matters. So the main purpose today behind this is bringing it to you to adopt so that we would have the option to expend up to 15% of our state accommodations tax for workforce housing. If you go to page 4 in the housing impact analysis, we have the last 3 fiscal years, or the last 2 fiscal years with the fiscal year 2024 estimate of what our ATAX collections were. They're between 900 and 1,100, and they're estimated to be around 1.5 million this year. I apologize, 914,000 in fiscal year 22. Fiscal year 23, 1 million. Fiscal year 24, 1,194,000. And again, estimated for fiscal year 25, approximately 1.5 million. So 15% of that, which is not a lot of money when we're talking about housing. But again, it's a tool in the tool belt. The City of Beaufort has previously joined with all of our other municipalities and the county in joining the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust. That occurred in fall of 2022. It was created. They just hired their first full-time executive director, and they are working on several strategic initiatives at the regional level. So we're looking forward to hearing more from them about what their strategies are going to be and how we could potentially fund strategies for addressing housing. So some highlights from the housing impact analysis. I don't want to go through the full 30-something pages, page by page for you. I've tried to include citations everywhere we could. I did note, I didn't catch this before we uploaded it to the agenda. For all the images in the housing impact analysis, it does not have the sources for the pictures. In my original document, those appear down at the bottom. I'll make sure those would be added so that you know where that information is coming from. That's particularly important with these housing and economic numbers, because depending on what surveys you're looking at, you get some different numbers. Some examples of that are the median home values. According to the Hilton Head Island housing impact analysis that they had commissioned in fall of 2023. For this, the area of Beaufort City, median sales prices were approximately $390,000 or 12.4% year-over-year increase from 2022. But if you take the Redfin data, which is the primary source of realtor data, and that same time period, it's showing a median home sales price of $466,000 or a 13.7% increase year-over-year. Either way, I think we all agree that the cost to buy a home is going up. As someone who bought a farm in North Carolina at 2.7 interest, I got a little sticker shock when I started looking down here, this past winter. Some more highlights, the median home value in 2021, according to our own comprehensive plan, was 277,000, or 21% higher than the national average. And again, that was in 2021. 36.1% of Beaufort households are considered to be cost burdened, meaning that 30% of their income is spent on housing, 30% or more. And that came from the most recent Department of Labor data in 2021. Renters, 46.9% are considered to be cost burdened. Homeowners with a mortgage, 27.4% are considered to be cost burdened. In our population, 65 or older, those households are considered to be 37.1% cost burdened. And I'd venture to say that the rising costs of doing business and everything really over the past 2 years, 3 years since 2021 has not helped those numbers. To address the other concerns for the housing impact analysis, it recommends several things, but the big thing is the city can't face this challenge alone. It's going to take a lot of public and private partnerships. If you look at Hilton Head Island, there was several news stories that made national news in the past month about all of the workforce and low-income housing programs that Hilton Head Island has implemented for their tourism industry, and how not a single one of those programs produced an affordable housing project. And that's been over, I believe it was a 3 to 4 year span. So it's a challenging issue that the city can't fix on its own. 15% of our accommodations tax money is not going to solve this problem. Rehabilitative programs are discussed. As Kurt told you, we just completed the survey with Historic Beaufort Foundation on possible rehabilitation programs. The city did allocate $50,000 in this past year's budget for that, and that's just seed money to get started. We're looking at other funding sources there. Adaptive reuse, expanded housing options. I know that's come up in the code edit sessions. I'm sure it'll come up as this commission dives more into that. But these are just some of the programs that we'll be exploring through the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust, and then potentially on our own as the city of Beaufort, and that the 15% A-tax money could potentially go towards. My goal and the role I'm in now would be when we come back in fiscal year, calendar year 26, to make suggestions to the commission about review and update to the comprehensive plan, would be that housing be one of our top priorities that we look at. And at that point, we should know what the housing trust intends to do. And at that point, we'll know exactly what the city is going to be responsible for. And we can start building out some metrics from there. We also need to update the data, get that 2025, 2026 data set so that we have a full 5 to 6 years post-COVID, where hopefully we can see some market trends and some, again, hopefully leveling out of those trends. That is the big picture view of what the housing impact analysis is, how we got to this point, what the steps were that got us here, what the upcoming steps will be, and some highlights of the information in there. I know it's a lot of information, but it's primarily regurgitation of statistics that are pulled from already compiled sources. And it matches with the Hilton Head Island study, although they have their own realtors and builders groups in Hilton Head Bluffton area. Bluffton also passed theirs last week, which almost identically mirrors Hilton Head Islands. That I didn't think was the best option for us because it didn't match with our existing comprehensive plan format. And again, some of these numbers are different for us here. So at this point, I'll open it up for questions and comments, concerns, criticisms.
I put together a lot of the comprehensive plan.
Yes, sir.
And I haven't really reviewed the information that you've presented to us
Yes, sir.
here yet. I would like the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely.
And I can see where Hilton Head has a huge influence on what's going on, since they're double the median price and about the same rate of change as what we are and where we are. Part of our comprehensive plan had a transportation element in it. And I presented something that was unanimously approved by everybody I presented it to.
Mhm.
And it is included in the comprehensive plan, which is a step in the direction of affordable housing without actually addressing affordable housing directly, but actually addressing how to deal with the people and their employment options
Mhm.
through transportation. And what, you may not know this, but you've got south of the Broad and north of the Broad.
I learned that very quickly.
Yeah. Well, what you really learn is that after the last, I think it's 25 years, there haven't been any studies north of the Broad on how to deal with issues.
Yes, sir.
It's all been south of the Broad.
Sir.
And we finally hit the population plateau that allows exploration of an analysis of some of those areas. But just to say, there's a lot of areas of the comprehensive plan that we're not really accomplishing right now.
Yes, sir.
And I would like to see, spent a lot of time coming up with the detail analysis of every single section of the comprehensive plan and how to address those and deal with those and what the major issues were in each. And I really would like to see us get back to taking a look at those
Absolutely.
and starting to deal with them.
Yes, sir. So I'm glad you brought up transportation. There is a short section on infrastructure noting its importance. I think the current comprehensive plan does a very good job of laying out what our options are moving forward. Speaking for another internal committee or team that I'm on in the downtown area, we are talking with Palmetto Breeze and looking at different transit options for the area. And I know that's a small piece of the picture, but infrastructure is going to play a much larger role. We're going to be discussing the county's tax referendum at the work session next week. That's why I said, or tomorrow. Yes, I'm sorry, tomorrow. So definitely recommend, if you have time, to be there to listen to that and comment on it.
What time and where is that?
That'll be at 5 o'clock. We'll do the code edit session. We'll start it. We'll wrap that up, and then we have another agenda item we've added, which is to review the updated proposal from the county for the 1 cent highway tax, or roads tax. I can't remember what we call it. Transportation tax. Yes, sir. Thank you. But yes.
Which we haven't gotten our fair share of yet.
I've spent quite a bit of my days digging through old documents and reading back and going through old meeting minutes and trying to piece together how we got to where we are on a lot of things. And there's definitely been a clear divide between north and south of the Broad. Yes, sir.
Well, if you'd ever like to get together, I'll be more. than happy to
Absolutely.
do that.
Absolutely.
One of the things that been on my mind for a long time is how the whole discussion on affordable housing has moved from affordable ownership housing to affordable rental housing.
Sir.
I've spent my entire career was in the development business, and large part of that with representing home building, large home builder associations. And they're always involved in these issues, and discussion was always, you know, where do we stand in community ownership? And
Yes, sir.
something happened, you know, starting with the great, where we lost complete control all over this country, of the whole affordable ownership.
Yes, sir.
Where we don't even talk about it anymore. We just assume that our obligation now is to find somebody a rental home.
Yes, sir.
One of the problems that is sort of new, and I don't know how much people are aware of it, is how these private equity, these large national private equity funds have bought up single-family housing.
About
I
a
mean,
thousand, it's about a thousand.
by the tens of thousands, and it never to me made sense as an economic model, and they're starting to unload some of those now. I mean, you know, owning an apartment complex of 300 units is, you can see that from an economy of scale, I can see how you can make money of that, but owning 300 homes or 10,000 homes or 100,000 homes, well, what they tend to become are really just an institutional slumlords. The only way you really make money in the business of renting individual homes is not take care of them. You know, and it's a sad, sad situation. And I don't know how much of that is going on. So I raised that just from one standpoint.
Yes, sir.
I don't know how much of it goes on in Beaufort County, but I assume if it's going on in Charlotte County or Davidson County or whatever it is that's going on in Beaufort
Yes, sir.
County. The other thing is, and just something to think about, I don't know if there's an answer to it at all, is, you know, whenever even small-time local investors, and I was one of those, I owned a rental home here because I just thought, I ended up selling it to the renter because I just sort of partly felt guilty owning it.
Yes, sir.
Because she wanted to own a home in the historic district, so I figured, well, I'll sell it to her, you know, and now she's just a proud owner of a, of a home in the historic district. I feel better about it than I did when I owned it. Think about that in the neighborhood I lived in, which is just outside the historic district. I think they call it the Glebe.
Yes, sir.
I don't know exactly how many homes there are. There may be 60 homes. And I think when I walk around, I count about 33% of those are rentals. Now, that means that people can't own a home there because, you know, all the people that just decided that it's important in their life to own a rental.
Yes, sir.
And we're not gonna have any home ownership in this city if people just keep buying homes to rent to somebody else. And I think we need to start thinking about how we can get more of these houses in home ownership. And
Yes, sir.
There's a major news story out of Atlanta, which is the hub of what you're talking about. Large corporations are buying up large tracts of brand new housing. They're actually developing housing,
Just for
turning them
rental.
into rentals.
Just for rental.
Yeah,
And we have exactly the same thing that's trying to be done in Port Royal.
Yeah.
And I think we, as a commission and as the city, need to come up with some new legislation, some new ordinances about how to deal with that.
right.
Because it will, as you're saying, become a blight on the landscape.
Yes, sir. If, I'm glad you also brought that up. If you'll notice in this housing impact analysis, when you'd really dig into it, it is focused on single-family home ownership. We do discuss rentals because oftentimes that is a step in that process. It can't be completely ignored. However, even in this legislation, it specifically authorizes the 15% for development of workforce housing, which must include programs to promote home ownership. Then it goes on to limit it to 15%. So that is the focus here, and I can tell you that has been the focus of all of the housing-related meetings that I've been to since I've been here. To be completely transparent with you, my background was primarily in public safety, emergency management. And then when I started practicing, I did a lot of land use, but housing is an issue that I've only ever speculated on. I've not had to do a lot of research. This has been very eye-opening to me going through this process, and I'm looking forward to working with both the county, the Low Country Council of Governments, the Housing Trust. We just had a meeting this morning with the Housing Trust, and it seems like they're really starting to build some momentum to bring us back information. Something that Mr. Trash might be able to speak to this. He's seen some of the work I've done, and we talked a bit. When I started, I don't like bringing something in front of you that's not a solution to a problem. And it is a I that has to be dotted, a T that has to be crossed. It brings a tool to our tool belt. But the way the legislation is written is it's primarily just an assessment of where we currently stand. That falls on us to take that information, actually do something with it. And I believe we can't be effective in local government unless we, one, are consistent, and two, that we have to have metrics. We have to measure ourselves in some way, shape, or form. We can all disagree about what the best metric for a particular situation may be, but we have to have metrics, and that is something that came up continuously throughout the hiring process for me here, and that I have done with other local governments and private entities, nonprofits in the past, and that's the function or the primary focus of a lot of my efforts now that we have a budget for fiscal year 2026. Yeah, we do our budgets different here. Starting in July is to really sit down with like this type of program, the home repairs program, the historic preservation programs, and figure out we have these ideas, we have these people that want to be a part of these programs, we have the people that want to see a solution. So how do we know we're actually moving towards a solution, not just spinning our wheels?
Well, I, for one, was happy to see that you included rental data in this report. I'm part of Hopeful Horizons, a local nonprofit. I'm on the leadership team. I'm on the legal team, but we do have a housing program, and we partner with other not-for-profit organizations here and around the state to help meet the needs of citizens for whom economically homeownership is not a possibility, but those citizens are members of the workforce or would like to be.
Yeah.
Also, we have many employees who realistically are not able to afford home ownership. That's a big part of our workforce. Maybe one day, a lot of them are young, and hopefully their fortunes will improve and the housing may become more accessible in the future. But accessibility of housing to the rental population is very important, and it's very lacking in our community. And even, there's also barriers other than economics that are important in the way all these things play out. There's a reluctance to rent to people who are low income, people who have had interactions with law enforcement, even though they may have served any sentence that may have been imposed upon them, and people who are suddenly without housing and without jobs as a result of victimization or other concerns. And so, to me, any part of any community's work in the matter of affordable and accessible housing has to include all of its citizens and options for all of them. So I would hope that, as we look at this, it's a little bit apples and oranges. We have census data from pre-COVID, and then we have some other data from more recent years, such as sales data. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. But I would hope that any future updates would definitely include a special look at the needs of citizens other than ones that are potential homeowners in our historic district.
Absolutely, and
Let me just be clear, I agree completely 100% with what Kimberly said. My only point is that government has lost sight of the whole idea of home ownership because it's become so expensive. All of the focus now is on on having affordable rentals. And I think, while that's important and that's good, this country is going in the direction of that our kids are not gonna be able to afford homes. Not just people in low-paying jobs, but nobody's gonna be able to afford homes the way that the prices have been escalating. And it's a whole series of things that we won't get into here. But that's just my point is we don't want Beaufort to become where the stock of housing that is ownership housing today all becomes rental housing eventually, where it's just, Beaufort is just one great big rental community where a few of us own homes and nobody else can afford them anymore. And we gotta figure out how to keep it from turning into that.
To both of those points, those have been conversations throughout my time here, and that I continue as I research more. They're both issues, and is housing. I never really understood, other than drug use, illegal controlled substance use, wicked issues. They always talked about it when I was doing my MPA at UNC, and when I was going to all these public administration classes. We have these wicked problems, nobody can solve them. It's not something that one community can deal with. Housing truly is that wicked problem. You have the people that may need these steps, getting them into rental housing. You have people that are further along. It's a whole continuum of people we're trying to help. And one of the other reasons we didn't include, other than the fact that the statute primarily wanted us to focus on single-family ownership, one reason we didn't go into a lot of detail, other than updating the statistics, is that there is a lot of conversation about the rental market in our comprehensive plan from 2021, and some really good suggestions. Plus, we have how many developments with multifamily developments coming into play? 3,200 units in multifamily dwellings that'll be coming into our market over the next couple of years. So that's going to require a really deep dive into that. But thank you. Both points are very well appreciated.
So you're looking to us to recommend this to council at some point here? Is
That
the
would
ultimate
be,
goal?
yeah, that would be staff recommendation, and my request would be that the planning commission adopt this as a appendix to the City of Beaufort's 2021 comprehensive plan, to give us a tool and a roadmap to launch into two things. One, as we continue our conversations with our currently funded housing initiatives, as we look at new housing initiatives, and three, as we approach 2026, that 5-year mark where we want to start digging into our comprehensive plan and looking at updates.
Could you say those again? What do you want us to do exactly?
Those are the reasons behind it. The primary thing we're asking for today is that the Planning Commission recommend this housing impact analysis as an appendix item to the City of Beaufort 2021 comprehensive plan, and continue that process that I outlined initially, that includes public hearings and updating our ordinance. The reasons behind that were threefold. One, we currently have funded programs such as the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust. We want to have this updated information as an official stance of council as they take into consideration the needs here in Beaufort. Two, as we start exploring new programs and new options to guide those, such as the housing program in the historic district that Kurt talked about earlier. And three, I don't remember what I said now.
So you're saying to adopt it as
An appendix item?
an appendix item, and then continue to update that appendix item as
That's
it
correct.
develops.
As we go, yes, as we move closer to the 2026, which is the 5-year mark where we are required by state code to review our entire comprehensive plan. We don't have to update the whole thing, but we can prioritize a review. I think after going through all of this, that the housing sections, population section, and several other pieces that go into that, such as infrastructure, need to be updated. We need to have some serious conversations. And I think we'll be ready to at that 2-year mark. 'Cause by then, we're gonna know that Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust, what they can or can't do, what types of programs they're looking at, and have an idea on our housing assistance program here and what we're looking at there. But again, today, just asking that the Planning Commission make a recommendation to council to adopt the housing impact analysis as an appendix item to the City of Beaufort's 2021 comprehensive plan.
Whenever you're ready for
Yeah.
such a motion, I'd be happy to
Can I
make
just
that.
ask one more question?
Yes, ma'am.
Does this, is there like a previous appendix? Is this replacing something or?
It is not.
Okay. so
There,
this is-
there are appendix items in the various sections, but this would just be adding an appendix item.
The section that reflects this is old. And so this is just continuing to update it, which we haven't had that kind of activity for years. So I welcome that.
So who wrote this?
I did.
Okay.
With input, reached out to the Beaufort Jasper Real Estate Association. We met through several other programs, brought this up to the Downtown Association. It's been a kind of a joint here in-house.
So in the 2021 comprehensive plan where there is a housing section.
Yes, sir.
This is an addendum. This would be an addendum to
Yep.
not replace that.
No, it would not replace, just an appendix item. Yes, sir.
Can you make that motion, Mike?
Well, quick question. And then these policy recommendations, that's gonna slowly, some of those gonna go slowly trickle down to the Beaufort Code at some point.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of that, y'all, has already been discussed, at least on the council side since I've been here.
Yeah.
So it's a constantly ongoing process.
All right, yeah, we'll take a motion.
I make a motion that we adopt these new housing
Impact analysis.
impact analysis as an appendix, and that it continues the update as new analysis comes about.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion
Thank you,
passes.
commissioners. Oh, yeah. Well, I apologize. Yes. I apologize. We did completely miss the public comment. I'm sorry. I got
Oh.
engaged with all of you. Open it back up for public comment.
Okay,
and you
yeah,
can
I
reconsider the
totally-
motion.
Was there
Yeah.
some comment that somebody wants to make?
Okay. All right, well,
Back it down.
we'll back it up and open it to public comment because we forgot. Yeah.
So on page 185 of the packet, which is the only way that I can refer to this, I just, I like the fact that there might be an impact statement included. I'm concerned about how much this will be drawn upon to make policy or building decisions. I think it's very unrealistic, and I understand that some of that is due to the different timeframes of the data presented. Some of the things were sort of touched on a little bit, offering density bonuses or other zoning incentives for projects that include affordable units. And as was already mentioned, we've got 3,200 multifamily units in the pipeline, and we don't even expect that much growth in this recent period of time. And how many of those, I might ask, for rental units are going to be affordable, and how do you make it affordable? exploring alternative construction methods and materials that could reduce building costs without sacrificing quality or durability. I ask you, how do you plan to do that? I'm looking at building an ADU in my backyard, and let me tell you, that's over $400 a square foot for practically nothing, and I'm talking very basic. So how do you make that affordable? How do you, this to me is very unrealistic. We've talked before in different meetings, and I'm sorry, I get confused now about city council and planning commission because I've been to most of them. But transportation, I was told that the city can't afford public transportation, and yet that is a major factor in making things available and affordable for workforce housing. So I just have concerns about this as a guiding document. I just have a lot of concern about it. It seems to me to be very unrealistic, while a very a wonderful goal. I mean, I think it's something that we do need to do. What the solution is, I don't know. I know that, you know, one of my children who does not own a home is, I don't know that she ever will again, and she owns her own business. So it's a factor everywhere. I just would like to see more realism, and I think JJ was talking about 15% hospitality tax, and I didn't get all the way through this. Is that in the end of this appendix, maybe? Okay, well, I missed that, and I agree that we should try to use some of our hospitality tax for that, because that to me would be the perfect opportunity to fund what drives our tourism. If we don't have the workforce to handle it, they won't come. My cousin won't come and eat here anymore because it takes too long to be served in a restaurant. Well, excuse me, but that's his opinion. He represents a typical tourist, I would guess.
Thank you.
Good evening, Lisa Sunderland, Historic Beaufort Foundation. I want to first congratulate JJ, the city manager, and the city council for tackling this, because I think y'all are taking some very hard-lined strides, for example, inclusionary zoning as a consideration. And, you know, that's been around for quite a while and been something that a lot of local governments will not touch. And it essentially, from the standpoint of inclusionary zoning, you are, it's a give or take situation. You want to build your development, then you need to do such a percentage of it to be affordable housing or workforce housing, or however that is designed. And it may get some pushback, but I really do applaud you for going in that direction. Couple of things I wanted to point out to y'all. If you want to do a little bit of additional research on your own with regard to this, there's a great article that just came out in the Post and Courier this week, as a matter of fact. I think it was over the weekend. And it was specifically about Charleston and Mount Pleasant going through this exact same challenge that's happening right now. Mount Pleasant has put a moratorium on new large-scale residential developments unless it is affordable. Now that is amazing, and their moratorium extends to 2025 through 2025, and they may consider to redo that again. Charleston itself has hired a group called Clarion, and Clarion is going to come and do an analysis of their zoning to figure out ways they can incentivize affordable housing happening within their community. So I think we're definitely heading in the right direction with what's going on. A couple of challenges that JJ, you might want to note in there, the short-term rental was a huge one, and thank you for bringing that up, Bill. When I was, prior to becoming the director, assistant director of Historic Beaufort Foundation, I was director of the Beaufort Area Hospitality Association. And we did a full report for council in 2019 about the loss of long-term affordable housing, and both rental and sale housing. And I think that was kind of at a critical juncture because we were recognizing what Mayor Cromer had called neighborless neighborhoods that were happening throughout our community. And what can we do to bring back our neighborhoods like the Glebe and ensure that when you walk outside, you don't see constant transient homeowners. You instead see folks who are invested in that community and are a part of that community, regardless of whether it's long-term rental or long-term sale housing within that community. So I think those are real positive points to bring to the front. I was on the city's affordable housing task force, and I appreciated the opportunity to do that. And one of the key elements that we had looked at, which could bolster your argument, JJ, was not just the percentage of folks in the different sectors, but what their salary ranges actually were. And a critical piece that we had identified was that in your top categories, accommodations and food services, the average pay, hourly pay, annually was $22,190 for folks who worked in the accommodations and food service industry. Retail trades, same thing, $20,800. First-year teacher, average salary at that time, $35,156, and then healthcare and social services, average salary, $37,563. And so I say salary on those bottom two, because those are more than likely going to be able to get a salaried position versus just an hourly position. But there's a new factor. If y'all follow what's happening on the labor side, starting July 1, the threshold to be an exempt or salaried employee is bumping up to $44,000 at entry level. And then it is supposed to happen January 1 that the threshold for a salaried employee is going to bump up, and this is federal law, bump up to $59,000. So what that's going to be doing, and y'all probably followed what's happened in California and folks losing their jobs, corporations kind of shifting off, laying off employees, is, how do you afford that? And so that reverts those people back to being just hourly employees when they'd previously been salaried employees with other benefits that come, with regard to that. So I know I'm kind of a little bit in the weeds, but I think this is such a huge impact to our community on every single level that it's important to be very aware of what's happening and how, and I guess what needs to be put in place to help make this goal happen within our community. One last point about transportation. The Palmetto Breeze, which was formerly the LRTA, or the Low Country Regional Transit System, has been over the years the primary way that folks from Hampton County, folks from Jasper County, folks from Colleton County, and even Beaufort got to Hilton Head to work. And that was really what was happening. When we did this initial survey in 2019, there were 15,000 people a day that traveled on the Palmetto Breeze to Hilton Head and Bluffton. 15,000 people a day. And so they weren't coming to Beaufort to work in most cases. But if you look at at it today, they do have routes that bring people to work from those places also in Beaufort, but folks would prefer to live where they work. They don't want to be living in Colleton or Hampton or Jasper and have to go to Beaufort or other places to work. So I do encourage y'all to support this, and I know you were about to until I said point of order. But I think there's a lot that goes into this, and having y'all as ambassadors supporting this will be critical, because we'll be supporting what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. So can we just renew the motion and revote, or?
Okay, revote. So
Got a motion on the table in a second, so.
So, with that same motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you all very much. All right, if there's nothing else, we could go ahead and make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.